News Channel.
Hello, there you are. Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News The Weekend. I hope you're having a wonderful time out there. It is actually bang on midday. It's halfway through October already. Nearly finished. How is this happening? OK, now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes, following recent tensions about potential tax rises and his definition of what a working person is. Then several protests are taking place in the capital today, including Unite the Kingdom March, organised by Tommy Robinson. We'll be there live. And more migrants are crossing the channel this year, and the figure has reached more than the whole of 2023 already. I'm Dawn Neeson, and the weekend starts right here. So, thank you for joining me on a Saturday afternoon. Hope you're having a lovely weekend out there. And if you're travelling around or doing something in the garden or whatever, remember we're on your radio as well, so you can listen to us as you're moving about. But the best thing to do is sit on the sofa and just enjoy yourself and get involved in the show. Really, really simple. And you are the most important people either as well. It's not me, it's not my brilliant panellists who are brilliant, but it's not about them, it's about you. And you can get involved in the show really simply by going to gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation. Whatever we're talking about, whatever you want to talk about, it's the weekend. We're light and easy here. Keeping me company this hour is former Labour advisor, the wonderful Scarlett Maguire, and former Conservative MP, Neil Parish, who's already being a bit naughty here in the corner, I have to say, hasn't he, Scarlett?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're...
Yeah, this is what the hour is going to be like.
Keeping an eye on these two, don't worry. But before we get into today's stories, here's the news with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state.
The Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the UK is monitoring the live situation and warned Iran not to respond.
Israel does have the right to defend itself, but we are urging and have been urging all sides to show restraint. Iran should not respond. We will continue to work with allies to de-escalate the situation across the region.
In other news, the Prime Minister has denied he was plotting a war against Middle Britain after suggestions that those who make an income from property or shares do not fall within his definition of working people. It comes after the Chancellor insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person and could be among those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the upcoming budget. It comes as Rachel Reeves will reportedly raise employers' national insurance by up to 2% in her October budget on Wednesday. Only private sector employers will carry the load, as public sector contributions are set to be reimbursed by the Treasury. The Chancellor is also expected to target employers' pension contributions with national insurance. It all forms part of £40 billion in fiscal measures to meet the government's spending promises. Now, the Prime Minister has given a press conference as the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa draws to a close after the UK failed to keep language on reparations out of the joint statement signed by attending nations. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the issue, insisting that there had been no discussions about money at the major summit. The Prime Minister downplayed the prominence of reparatory justice on the agenda, saying talks about climate resilience had instead been the absolute priority. Meanwhile, the King says he hopes he survives long enough to see Samoa again as he bid farewell to the Pacific Islands. King Charles and Queen Camilla ended their 4-day state visit to Samoa by visiting a village twinned with the UK as the major Commonwealth summit drew to a close. Back in the UK now, a man remains in custody on suspicion of attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. While the girl's injuries are not life-threatening, the conditions of the woman and the boy remain unknown. Detectives say those involved were known to each other and they are not seeking any further suspects. Now, political activist Tommy Robinson is missing his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Hundreds of supporters have started walking down Victoria Street towards Parliament Square for the rally. Some demonstrators were wearing I Am Peter Lynch badges in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. And Phil Lesh, the founding member of the US rock band The Grateful Dead, has died at the age of 84. The bass player featured in the original lineup of the band alongside Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, Bill Kreutzmann and Ron McKernan. The musician's official Instagram account said he passed peacefully this morning. He was surrounded by his family. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Looking lovely in orange, isn't she? This isn't orange red before you asked. And before we get started, I'm going to say a good morning to, or good afternoon even, to Kez. Dawn, what's the point in asking for our comments? We just get ignored. Just think how many can be read out every time you ask for one of us. Well, good morning. I've just read your comment out. gbnews.com/you'll say if you want to get in touch. OK, now let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes, following recent tensions about potential tax rises and his definition of what a working person is. Oh, my Lord, I have to say that phrase one more time. I'm going to kill myself. The Prime Minister also addressed the issue of reparations, stating that conversations around reparatory justice have been agreed at the summit, but that none would be around money. He spoke earlier. Let's have a listen.
I should be really clear here. In the 2 days we've been here, none of the discussions have been about money. Our position is very, very clear in relation to that.
Clear. OK. Joining me now is a GB News political correspondent, the wonderful Catherine Forster. Catherine, he used the word clear twice in one sentence there without being actually very clear about anything. What did you make of what he had to not say?
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, Dawn. Well, in terms of reparations for our part in the slave trade, I think moderately clear in that he said that although there is a reference to reparatory justice in this communique that's gone out on behalf of all the 56 countries that were there, none of the discussions have been about money. So the government is saying they're not going to pay any money in reparations, which will be a relief, given that some people were saying that our liability could be up to 18 trillion. I don't think that was ever possible, to be honest, given that we couldn't begin to afford it. But I think going forward, there may well be other discussions around supporting some of these countries more with climate change, something that the government is already doing because many of these are small island nations, Commonwealth nations, and climate change is already really affecting them. It might be, too, that some of the long-term debts that these countries have could be written off. But in terms of working people, my goodness, the government have got themselves into an almighty mess about this, haven't they? But I think the bottom line is Labour pledged before the general election no tax increases on working people. But if you drill into the detail of that, what they specifically say is on income tax, national insurance and VAT. Now, they say that they're sticking to those pledges, although the bans at which you're dragged into higher rates of income tax might be frozen for longer. So you could argue that that will be ultimately a rise in income tax. Also, national insurance, no rise for employees, but there's going to be a rise for employers. And lots of people will ultimately say that that will feed back on to working people. But more than that, there's going to be clearly all sorts of tax rises because Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has got to fill this £22 billion black hole that we hear so much about. We understand she wants to actually raise about 40 billion. So things like capital gains tax, inheritance tax, fuel duty possibly are all going to be rising. And many, many of those will, of course, be paid by working people.
Every single one of them will affect working people at one point. And Rachel Reeves admitted on Friday that some working people will face tax rises in the budget next week, the Halloween budget from hell. Catherine Forster, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on what Keir Starmer didn't actually say this morning. OK, let's see what my panel make of this. We have the wonderful Scarlett Maguire and Neil Parish joining me. Now, reparations, Scarlett. Where do you start? I mean,
OK,
I think we were owing about 17 trillion at one point, as far as somebody somewhere had worked out.
Yes. So reparations is actually incredibly simple. We don't
pay them.
We're not paying them.
Yeah,
Keir said that right from the beginning. He said it again. What instead, which frankly I think we have to do anyway, is there's two things that particularly Caribbean nations are suffering from, but island nations. One is climate change. Is they're poor. They can't do it. They need help with adapting to climate change. And the other is that because, so when Britain takes out a loan, we get a really good rate of interest because we're very stable. They don't. So they've got these loans that they're not even managing to pay back the interest every year. So everything is going up. Now, in Jubilee, there was the Jubilee Debt Relief Campaign, and in 2000, the IMF, the Britain and others, but it was absolutely led by Gordon Brown, wrote off a lot of debt relief for African countries, a lot of debt. And I think that's what we're going to do, something like that. So we're going to help them, but what we're not going to do is to say, you know, yes, you can have 18 million trillion and we'll split it between you.
But that makes sense, doesn't it, Neil?
We're in danger of agreeing, but I think where I disagree with the Prime Minister is when he gets there to this conference, it's almost as though reparations have sort of come from somewhere out of the sky. I mean, considering that the King was sort of heckled when in Australia, I mean, the whole thing has been a huge issue. So why wasn't he there ready with something positive? Because the problem is it's so negative now. You know, we're not doing any reparations, quite right, but why don't we actually talk about the debt relief? Why don't we actually talk about trade as well as we talk about climate change? All of these things are very important to these countries, and we've got to talk about the here and now, because the last thing you want to do is try and go down the route of reparations, because who do you actually compensate and when and how? And let's dare I say, in a lot of the developing countries, some of the governance in those countries is not the best in the world, and where will that money go? And so therefore let's actually be positive and actually drive it forward. But I think the Prime Minister should have been much more ready to be on the front foot on it, because it was always ever going to be there. All the Caribbean and all the other countries would naturally, they number hugely in the Commonwealth. They want to keep the Commonwealth together. And see, one of the issues after Brexit was that we were supposed to be entering all these wonderful new deals.
Yes, I remember hearing about it.
Yes, I remember hearing it as well from the other side. So, you know, so let's actually get out there, embrace that and be much more positive with them. Otherwise, I rather fear we're going to be sort of driven. In politics and political life, very difficult to defend. You've got to go on the offensive. And I just feel that the Prime Minister has just been a little bit defensive. I can understand why, but I think he should have been a bit more on the front foot before he got there.
A bit Weasley words occasionally, you could say, the Prime Minister, rather than actually coming out with something positive or a tangible plan to do.
Well, I mean, actually, I agree with Neil.
Oh,
yes,
I'm really sorry about this.
Terrible danger.
But I do remember.
We'll disagree in the minute.
We will seriously disagree soon. But no, I do remember in the days of Blair and Brown that whenever there was an international conference, they'd go there, they'd be on the front foot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why once Cameron came in, everything was such a... I mean, since then, we have not been on the front foot, and we're not anymore. And they'd go there and they'd say, this is what we want out of the conference, and this is what we hope people will do. And of course, you know, so what we want is Keir Starmer and his team going in and saying, no, we're not going to do reparations, but we are absolutely happy to talk about the other things, which we need to talk about. Now, he sort of said that these were discussed, but we don't quite know how.
But the problem was he looked like, you know, just being completely intransigent, and we were the old colonial masters, and, you know, you get back in your box. Perhaps it was a little bit too harsh, but I think that was how it looked. And I think, have we been there with something to offer them? And I think something will be offered, but I just feel that it should have been there because it was going to be expected.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point, right? OK, we know, obviously, you know, as you mentioned, climate crisis, these islands are going to suffer. So what was the point in all these people flying there to discuss something and coming away with really nothing? All I've heard is a lot of words that don't mean anything.
Well, I mean, look, this is what international conferences do. It's about keeping the Commonwealth together. Right, and
they all hate us, Scarlett. They want to get out of it.
It's not us.
No, they don't all hate us.
It's them, and they don't all hate us. Otherwise, they'd all. But it's about that they want to be a Commonwealth of nations. With us, but as Neil says, we don't want to be the colonial. Well, what we say goes. But what we're saying is, this is what we're not doing, but what we needed to do was to have done a lot of work beforehand to...
You see, now that we've left the European Union and we're not bound by all their rules of trade, we can actually do sort of special deals with some of these particular countries, you see. And, I mean, it's always a
We've
possibility.
Had 5 years to do it.
I'm not saying... I'm not saying that we got on and did it, but what I'm actually saying is a real possibility. And I think that's what we need to go over and start offering. We've got to have a package of measures so that when the Prime Minister of the day goes to these conferences, he's got something or she's got something positive to talk about rather than being driven back home with his tail between his legs, because that's what it looks a bit like.
Oh, I think that's unfair, but I think we could have. I think we could have done more.
We could have done a lot more. I could have actually come away feeling like we've achieved something by going over in the first place, but it probably got a nice tan out of it. What do you reckon?
Well, and King Charles, you know, got to Australia.
These conferences do have to take place, all, I think, really.
Yes, right. OK, well, I have to move on from that one. Will you stop agreeing, you two? OK, start annoying, very much so. Right, now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's nearly Christmas. It really is. I know, I can't believe it either. But how would you like to win your entire Christmas this year? Well, we're giving you the chance to do just that with the very latest Great British Giveaway.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents. Christmas lunch, that's on us too. With a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. And the best news, you'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck. Oh my God, I've only just put my Halloween tree up. Honestly, how is it really Christmas? I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Yes, I do have a Halloween tree. Stay with us as we're going live to the protest in London. All of that and much more are coming up. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're joined by Lewis Oakley and Esther Stanhope. And Lewis, let's start with free gear Keir, shall we? It's been the story of the week, and apparently it's led to, well, calamity in the polls.
Yeah, so he has dropped by 26 points in the opinion polls. And, I mean, it's just been sort of going down from day one. He didn't even start that high. But, yeah, this is just bad optics. As we say, like, he hasn't done anything illegal or wrong. Everything was declared, but at the same time you're telling people they don't get their winter fuel allowance and you're there walking off with your swag bag. It's just not a good look. And even, you know, I was thinking as well the optics of them trying to clamp down on MPs having second jobs. You know, any of those could turn around and say, well, actually, we have to pay for our own clothes. I just think it's just bad optics that he's had. And, you know, we've got those comparisons of Sunak in the stands. He's just sat amongst the people. And
Prince William goes to Villa games, albeit in the director's box, but it's not an 8k per game seat. And by the way, can I just mention, this isn't just an isolated Labour incident. Since the start of their tenure, they were accused of filling the civil service with previous Labour donors, previous Labour aides, people who worked for Labour Together think tank. The civil service is meant to be politically neutral, and they bypassed a lot of procedures to get people into their positions, not least the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who parachuted Ian Caulfield, his name was, who donated $5 grand personally to her, and then he ended up in the Treasury with a 175k a year job. Yes, he did resign after it was revealed in the Times, but it does make you wonder, you know, you've spent years having a go at the Tories for this, and you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's full of hypocrisy, and also the whole Sue Gray thing, and they were slagging off the Conservatives for not towing the line, and now they're being hypocrites because now they're taking freebies.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. I've just been showing the lovely Scarlett and Neil my Halloween tree. And they are stunned that people have Halloween trees. Please tell me you have a Halloween tree out there. Come on, it's like a Christmas tree, but little pumpkins on it, just me. gbnews.com/yoursay. Let me know that I'm not the only one with a Halloween tree. Now, there's lots of marches going on in London today. There's an increased police presence in the capital as several demonstrations are taking place. The protest organised on behalf of Tommy Robinson under the name Uniting the Kingdom is expected to be met with a counter-protest organised by the Stand Up to Racism group. I think there's two other protests going on as well. Joining me now is GB News reporter Sophie Reaper, who's live on the streets for us. Sophie, which particular protest are you at this morning? What's going on?
Well, Dawn, we're at the Stand Up to Racism protest, which is currently gathering here at Piccadilly. There are thousands gathering down Regent Street. Speaking to the police, they say they're just forming them up because at 1 o'clock they will move off from here, they'll move up to Trafalgar and then head down to Whitehall. So thousands already gathering here. You can see the signs, many of them carrying the placards saying things like refugees, welcome, end racism. Some even saying oppose Tommy Robinson. Now, Now, the reason for that is because today's protest here is a counter-protest to the Uniting the Kingdom protest taking place elsewhere in London, which was linked with Tommy Robinson. Now, of course, he will not be in attendance today because he was remanded in custody yesterday for a contempt of court charge. So he will not be present, but we're seeing pictures of that protest online as well, and there seems to be thousands also gathering there. They're setting off at 12:30 as opposed to 1 o'clock, and they will make their way down to Parliament Square. Now, the police presence here is incredibly heavy. We were speaking to one police officer earlier. He was telling us about how they've drafted in from all over the UK to try and make sure that nothing goes wrong today. And that is the case. As you said, Dawn, there are other protests taking place in London today. There's one at 12 o'clock, so it should be taking place right now in Trafalgar Square, uniting the families, which we are expecting the family of Chris Cabba to be attending. So it's a busy day in London today. Thousands gathering for those various protests, and we're going to be bringing you all the latest throughout the day.
Sophie, I'm assuming this does mean that several roads in the capital are closed, and obviously, you know, going about your everyday business must be quite difficult today.
Absolutely. I would advise anyone in London today not to be doing anything touristy because, as you say, roads are closed, barricades are in place. We're expecting both the Unite the Kingdom and the Stand Up to Racism protests to be dispersed by 6 p.m. That's what the Met Police have said. So if you are planning to spend any time in London today, I would make it later on.
Right, OK, that's great. Thank you. That's GB News reporter Sophie Reaper on the streets of London when there are 4 protests going on today. And as you just heard Sophie say, if you are planning a trip into London, so if you're a tourist, probably best put it off until later today. We will be going back to Sophie throughout the morning or throughout the afternoon even to keep you up to date on those breaking stories. OK, let's see what my panel make of this. We have Scarlett O'Gara and Neil Parish with me. Neil, coming to you first on this one. Everyone's got the right to protest, but once again, we've got another weekend of London being basically shut.
Yeah, I mean, it does cause people a lot of difficulty, but I think, you know, in a democracy, we need to be able to protest, and as long as people protest peacefully, it's fine, and it doesn't matter really whether they protest on the right of politics or on the left of politics. It's really how these demonstrations takes place. It's whether they've got offensive placards and all these types of things. So, I mean, on the whole, I think our police actually handle it pretty well because you let them protest. I mean, the number of times I was walking into the House of Commons and there was a different protest outside, and usually they were peaceful and they handled it. And I think that's the way to handle it. I think the trouble is if you try and move marches on and you try and make it difficult for people to march, they want to march all the more. And so therefore, I think let's handle it and let's demonstrate. Some of the issues we may not really like. And some of the issues we may like. But I think in the end, democracy works by all sides being able to have a march, be able to protest. But like I said, what we don't want is the two sides getting together, and then there's violence. And that for me, that is the issue. It's when they're violent and when they're offensive. Otherwise, I think you can have as many people as you like demonstrate, however difficult it is at the time, because I think it will pass. And it's a release valve in a democracy.
So we had we're calling it the Tommy Robinson March, planned, and then an anti-racism protest was planned to protest against that particular one. Do you think it's sensible to allow both to go ahead? I mean, just get one off and then there's no chance of it all kicking off, is there?
No, look, I think it's fine, and I hate to say this, but I agree with Neil. I think it's really important that people are allowed to demonstrate, and I won't agree with the people on the Tommy Robinson March, but actually it's very, very important that their voices are heard, that if they are racist or Islamophobic, if there are terrible, just like the Palestinian marchers can be arrested for hate speech and for being anti-Semitic, so the Tommy Robinson marchers cannot do that. But actually, it's really important. The former Lord Chief Justice of Northern Ireland, who's a Catholic, said to me that it was very, very important in Northern Ireland that the Protestant ultras were allowed to march, however awful it is, in July, where, you know, they are deliberately provoking the Catholics, because he said that way they feel their voices are going to be heard. And if you suppress it, it just flares up somewhere else, and that's why the pro-peace in Gaza marches are so important. Is that people feel that they're heard, even if they're taken no notice of, and these marches really need to go ahead, because that's the country we live in.
The key is to try and treat everybody equally, and it's not always easy, but that is the key.
Do you think we have achieved that with the
I think, broadly speaking, I think sometimes all sides, I think, you know, some of the Palestinian marches were too anti-Israel and too anti-Jewish, but of course they also have a huge issue with what's happening in Gaza. So you know, things are running high, and I think, you know, some of the right-wing marches also go too far. But I think in the end,
What do you mean by go too far?
Well, I think, you know, when they result in violence, you know, and when you had lots of people locked up, then you start to see a real problem. And you know, when you're threatening people in hotels and this type of thing, as far as I'm concerned, that is by far a step too far.
No,
but on the other hand, you know, you need to be able to, you know, there are people in this country who are generally fearful of too many people coming in, too many migrants, you know, facilities and everything overstretched. And so therefore they should legitimately be able to march and protest, but they mustn't be violently breaking into where asylum seekers are staying.
Just very quickly, we're running out of time on that, Neil. When you say sort of people, you know, worried about immigration, illegal immigration, would you say that makes them right-wing?
Not necessarily, no, but it makes them, I suppose, they're certainly classified as that. I suppose it depends on who. I think what happens is the right-wing activists and agitators get hold of these marches, and that's what creates them, if you like, into the right-wing response. I suspect on those marches you will have some very right-wing people. On those marches you'll have just people generally concerned about the overstretching of housing and facilities and health in this country. So it's a combination of both. But whenever you get a march, it's always the strong ones that go in there on all sides who lead it, and that's where the danger comes and the violence comes if you're not careful.
Can I quickly say there is an enormous difference between a march and a riot. The riots were appalling, and they were organised from outside.
OK, fine. We have to move on, unfortunately. You can see, or you could see the live footage that we will be going back to that throughout the afternoon, so please do stay with us. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, it's time again for the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. It's 12:32. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has warned Iran not to respond after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest and the UK is monitoring the live situation. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state. In other news, the Prime Minister has denied he was plotting a war against Middle Britain after suggestions that those who make an income from property or shares do not fall within his definition of working people. It comes after the Chancellor insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person and could be among those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the upcoming budget. In other news, the Prime Minister has given a press conference as the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa draws to a close after the UK failed to keep language on reparations out of the joint statement signed by attending nations. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the issue, insisting that there had been no discussions about money or at the major summit. The Prime Minister downplayed the prominence of reparatory justice on the agenda, saying talks about climate resilience had instead been the absolute priority. And political activist Tommy Robinson is missing his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Hundreds of supporters have started walking down Victoria Street towards Parliament Square for the rally. Some demonstrators are wearing a I Am Peter Lynch badge in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think. Every day we'll be running our poll of the day. Today we're asking, can Keir Starmer's government really smash the gangs? The final result will be announced later in Nana Aqua's show. For all the latest poll news and how to vote in our polls, please do just go to gbnews.com/poll. And there's lots more coming up on today's show. It's really packed, and we will be keeping you up to date on the protests going on in London. Now, but more Channel migrants have reached the UK this year than in the whole of 2023. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Leeson, and this is GB News The Weekend. We'll see you soon.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We have a three-way split in the weather today. Sunny for some, grey in the southeast, with rain in the northwest. Having a look at the bigger picture then, we've got frontal systems towards the southeast, bringing cloudier skies here. And then we have this cold front bringing increasing amounts of cloud towards the north and west. So a damp afternoon for some of us, especially towards the southeast, patchy outbreaks of rain, cloudier skies here, and towards the northwest, this band of more persistent and heavy rain moving southeastwards. But in between, across much of northern England, Wales and the southwest of England, plenty of sunshine on offer, and we could see highs reaching up to 15 or 16 degrees. So as we go through Saturday afternoon, we have bands of heavy rain pushing its way southeastwards across much of Scotland. Behind that, blustery showers coming through and also turning much chillier. Across Northern Ireland, some early evening sunshine across the far west, but outbreaks of rain still continuing to push their way south and eastwards. Some early evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the southwest of England, but across parts of the southeast staying cloudy here, but the cloud will gradually ease. We may see some mist and fog developing, and then this band of cloud and rain will sink its way southwards into parts of Wales, into the Midlands, but generally starts fizzling out as it does so to bring many places a dry and clear night, but it will be feeling colder out there. So as we start Sunday morning, it will be a bright but chilly start to the day. Any mist and fog patches are soon lifting. So that leaves plenty of autumnal sunshine out there across much of England and Wales, but another system moving through, so bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland to end Sunday, feeling chillier for all of us, highs of 14 degrees. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Aquair, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There you are. Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. And now, lots of you have been getting in touch, and I'm going to read as many as I possibly can, and I will do, promise. OK, but a lot of you are talking about the marches, and just a reminder, we will be covering the London protests live throughout the afternoon, so please do stay with us. We'll bring you up to date on any happenings. Bev says, why are you just showing the far-left anti-British gatherings and Palestinian placards? Bev will be covering all the protests, I promise you. Sophie, our reporter, just happened to be in that particular location at that time, but we will be covering across everything as fairly as we can. And Richard, you say, seeing all the lobbies and their banners, refugees welcome, they should be forced to accommodate one or more. Lots of people agreeing with that sentiment as well. OK, well, we've got a shiny news section of the show for you. Woohoo! This is where we do other stories that are in the newspapers. A reminder that newspapers are available. Please don't go to buy them. But there are lots of other stories we need to talk about. So the first story I think we're going to kick off with is Channel migrants. Now, this is from The Telegraph today. More Channel migrants have reached the UK this year than in the whole of 2023. So far, we're up to 29,451, and estimated final figure this year could be 35,000, possibly 40,000. Ooh, that's a lot of people, Scarlett, isn't it? People are getting very annoyed about this one as well. How's that smashing the gangs going?
Well, it's really, really difficult. I mean, so last year was higher than the year before. It goes up every time. What's so scary is there's a whole... I mean, when we say the gangs, they're massive amount of people. So in Germany, in a number of enormous warehouses, there are boats that are being sold to people who want to make money. They're being sold for about 15,000 euros, all in. You take them to the French coast, you charge people 5,000 or 10,000 a go to go across, and that's it. Now, the problem is that in Germany it's completely legal to have these boats. So we've got to work with the Germans to start smashing these warehouses. I mean, as long as you have boats that you can go. I mean, it is really, really difficult. And the other thing is of course, we want to deter people from coming over by sending people back. Is that actually to say, OK, you're not going to stay in a hotel for 3 years, which you can, leave when you feel like, right? Is that actually we're going to take you, and within 2 months or whatever, if you're not a refugee, then you're going home.
You're sounding terribly right-wing, Scarlett.
No, I'm sounding sensible.
What I'm interested with Scarlett's initial comments when she says, how terribly difficult it was, and is, because I can't remember Labour ever saying that to us when we were in power. It is absolutely difficult, and we must smash the gangs. And I think, the Germans will have to change their legislation, hopefully, so that they can stop these boats. But I think also there is another issue, and this one Scarlett will disagree with me on, is that when you actually take a deterrent away, like sending them to Rwanda or wherever, then immediately Keir Starmer came in. A lot of the migrants over on the other side, when being interviewed, said, he's a very nice man. He actually wants us. Now, he doesn't necessarily want the migrants, and it's dangerous for them to cross the channel. But there is no deterrent. And Rwanda became very difficult to deliver, and I'll go down all those arguments with you, Scarlett. But in the end, it was a deterrent. And I think, you see, we've all been trying to smash the gangs, and I think we'll agree on that one wholeheartedly. And it's not like the last government wasn't doing anything about smashing the gangs. So none of this will happen quickly, and in the meantime, the numbers will increase. And unless you actually want to make sure that when they come, they're going to be deported somewhere else. And of course, the other issue, Scarlett, with you is, yes, you can repatriate them, but a lot of them need to be repatriated back to Europe. And of course, unless you do some sort of deal on free movement, the Europeans won't do a deal. So all of these things are quite difficult to achieve. And I'm glad you recognised at the start that it's all very difficult. But like I said, we heard nothing from Keir Starmer on this when he was Leader of Opposition, because we were terrible. He was going to stop the boats very, very quickly, if I remember rightly, and he's not going to.
Unlike your former Prime Minister, your present leader, former Prime Minister, he never said stop the boats as something he guaranteed. I mean, what he said is this is what we're going to do.
And he was going to reduce the numbers, if I remember rightly.
Yes,
they appear to be increasing.
And we've been in power for how many weeks?
Oh, you've been in power a long time.
An awful
long enough to take £300 away from pensioners and get rid of VAT on school fees. You've been up to all sorts in your short period of time. So why haven't you actually reduced the numbers rather increase the numbers?
Because the problem is the numbers are coming through because, as I said, there's a lot of so-called entrepreneurs in Europe who see this as a very, very good way of making money. And it is difficult. I mean, you know, it is difficult until the Germans change their legislation, which I'm sure they will do, right? But we also need, which they are doing, is to start sending people back. And actually, as unpopular with the left as it's going to be, is to say these are the people we're sending back because they're not refugees, they're migrants, and there is a difference.
You see, I'd have a lot more sympathy for what Scarlett was saying, is if we'd had some sort of recognition from Keir Starmer when he was in opposition how difficult this was. But all we had all the time was it's this terrible Tory government, can't stop the boats, can't stop the migrants coming in, blah, blah, blah. And that's the problem, I think. And I think that's what drives people over to voting reform, because they say, a plague on all your houses, you're both useless, and we'll vote reform. And I think until somebody gets to grips with it, it's fine while reform splits the Tory vote, but it won't be so good when reform splits the Labour vote, you see, and that's why the issue does really have to be dealt with.
No, but I'm talking about the issue as an issue for Britain rather than a political issue.
But it is a highly political issue.
But you have to admit that it was a real mistake for Rishi to guarantee that he would stop the boats. We can't stop the boats until...
Who made it the political issue? Very much Keir Starmer, as well as the previous Prime Minister. Both sides made it a real political issue. So therefore, it's no good now saying let's play it all very nicely, and we won't play politics with it, because it is very, very political this way.
I could listen to you all day. Just quickly, Scarlett, last word. Always go to the lady. Last word.
Yes, exactly.
What we have to do is the biggest thing we can do is to make sure that people know that they can't stay here, and that's about actually bringing the 3-year thing down to 3. And by the way, I just want to say I do have refugees in my house, so there.
She does. She actually does. Okay.
Not at this minute, but I normally do.
You haven't checked for the last hour, Scarlett. Yes. Just pointing this out. Anything's possible.
No, and I still have Rim's things as he tries to get rehoused.
And Gary Lineker, I believe, has the same room as well. Okay. Now, thank you very much, former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and former Conservative MP Neil Parish, for joining me. A brilliant combination, I think you'll agree. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and we'll be looking at all of your weekend sports, so don't go anywhere. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Well, drinkers have been warned about a drop in the quality of French wines after poor weather conditions hit this year's grape harvest. Winemakers across France will make 240 million fewer bottles of wine this year, the country's farming ministry said on Tuesday. So should we think of switching from French to English? I'm joined now by sommelier and founder of Inflorescence Wines, Jacinta Madison Williams. Hello, Jacinta.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. First of all, let's just think about the poor French. Has this been a fairly universal weather catastrophe for France?
It has. A kind of across the board, we're about 22% down on last year's crops, which is quite significant. I think it's like one of the 4 years over the last century that have been this low. So.
And it's affected both quality and quantity?
I would say more so quantity. There's always ways of counteracting quality. It depends if people are desperate to make wine. They can obviously push out more watered-down grapes. There's been a lot of rain, if you hadn't noticed. Not only in France, we felt it here too. But lots of frost, supercell hailstorms have completely wiped out some crops. So in some cases, there's nothing to make. In other cases, it's just really watered down grapes, and you want to pick earlier to make sure you're avoiding all those rains. But I would say more so it's quantity. But saying that, France is still the biggest producer of wine in the world. It might be taken over by Spain this year, but as a consumer, don't panic. We're not going to run out of wine. And we obviously have lots of lovely wine growing here now in England. So whether we do make a little jump for a bit to English wine, but there's definitely still lots out there.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is indeed the weekend, which means we have to talk sport. Bearing in mind, if you are travelling to sport this afternoon, you can keep us on your radio and listen to us as well. But now, to talk all the sport, we have Sports Supremo, Aidan McGee, joins us in the studio. Aidan, I'm here chatting to you, so I'm missing sport this afternoon.
Yes.
But what's happening?
We've got quite a few things on today, really. I mean, I think the standout event of the weekend, if we're looking ahead to tomorrow as well, has to be Arsenal versus Liverpool. My only concern, though, Dawn, is that we want to see these big teams playing each other at key points in the season. There's so many injuries on both sides, particularly with Arsenal. Bukayo Saka looks like he's going to be a doubt. Martin Odegaard has been out for a few weeks. And what's annoying about these clubs, I stood in front of a press conference in front of managers for years and years, and you'd ask how long a player was out for, and they'd say, oh, just a week, I think, just 2 weeks. And then by the time they actually get back, it's probably been 2 months, because they don't want to reveal to their opponents how long the player's out for. And so it gives you, I mean, Odegaard's been a huge loss, and he was lost on international duty as well, which will really annoy the clubs. But Alisson's missing from Liverpool as well. And I just think if Arsenal lose tomorrow, given all the fanfare of the pre-season and how well they played last season, if they find themselves 7 points behind Manchester City after today's games and after tomorrow's games, then you can make a case for saying that Arsenal's title push could be over on the weekend. The clocks go back, which would be very disappointing. Yeah. But we've got some other decent games today. Villa in action, been in fantastic form, haven't they, with in the Champions League against Bournemouth today. And Man City face Southampton, which you would think could be a home banker, which leads people to think Arsenal really need to go to Anfield tomorrow and try and get a result. And then we've got Harry Redknapp as well. He's got his book out with Jamie Redknapp.
Yes, absolutely.
It's serialised in the Times. Martin Samuel's been reading about it. A bit really caught me this morning, because Harry's always been an avuncular kind of figure. Even 20 years ago when I was covering him at West Ham, he was there between, 94 and 2001. Yeah. And Jamie Redknapp actually said in the paper this morning, he said, I didn't go into management because, there you go, there's a picture there's a quote on the screen there. I saw how low Dad would get, so that's why I never became a manager.
See, that's quite sad because, I mean, obviously I'm a West Ham fan, so I remember the Redknapp days there. And Harry, as you say, was always one of those cheeky chappies, very laughy, very jokey, like nothing would get him down.
No, exactly. And he said that he'd go back to his flat and he'd be staring at the ceiling after a game. And this wasn't just at West Ham, this was other clubs as well. Yeah. And he said, anyone looking back at him now, not eating properly, he said, anyone looking back at him and seeing him in that state, with the benefit of hindsight, would say he really needs help. Now, it's interesting because Jamie Redknapp could have chosen that managerial role. He would have got opportunities, no question about it. I think he was very wise back in 2005. I saw his last game for Southampton against Manchester United the day Saints got relegated. Matthew Letizier's last game for the club. I remember it very, very well, quite vividly. And because of his injuries, he went into the media quite soon in that 2005 season with Sky. He's had a very steady income out of that, year in, year out, without the stress that a manager would have had. A manager would have been washed up even if they've done 2 or 3 good jobs, look at Frank Lampard now, his cousin, struggling to get work.
Talking of managers, let's talk how the ladies do it. Serena Wiegmann, actually, I know the Lionesses lost last night, but it wasn't a bad game, was it?
No, it was a decent game. I mean, they were 3-0 down at half-time. I'm a little bit worried about them, though, because they're a little bit easy to play through. And I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with the crowd of 54,000. It's better than they could have got 5 years ago. But they were anticipating a sellout, which would have been disappointing. And given that there were no other major events really in London last night, I think they'll look to improve that. But that comes with the success of the team. We're still 8 months out from the Euros next summer in Switzerland, and they have to raise their game. 7 of those players played in the final of Euro 2022, which was against Germany, of course. And I wonder whether Serena Wiegmann is open to some of the accusations that dogged Gareth Southgate. Possibly she's too loyal to 1 or 2 of these players.
Oh.
Maybe. Look, I mean, look, you know, it's not like the tournament's starting tomorrow. There is room to get things right. Okay. And they did pull it back in the second half as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was good.
Not all bad.
Okay, so, Aidan, thank you very much. OK, time for the weather with Catherine. How's it going to be for you?
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We've got a 3-way split in the weather today. Rain in the northwest, sunnier for most towards the south, but it will be turning chillier for all of us on Sunday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got frontal systems out towards the south and east, but a cold front towards the northwest. And here we have heavy spells of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across Scotland, but later into northwest England, into Wales, but it will gradually sink its way southwards and start fizzling out. We may see some mist and fog patches across the southeast early through this evening, but those should clear. And in many places tonight, seeing a clear night, but temperatures will drop. We may see some mist and fog, but also some pockets of frost. So a colder but brighter start out there through Sunday for many of us. There will be some showers, especially across northern parts of Scotland, quite blustery as they move through. But across many places, we're still seeing some sunshine, but feeling colder out there to start Sunday morning. And then we have cloud and rain coming through across western parts later into Northern Ireland. Elsewhere though, across much of England and Wales, plenty of sunshine to start the day. And we hold on to that sunshine across much of England and Wales through Sunday, so plenty of autumnal sunshine out there. But further towards the west, especially across Northern Ireland and Scotland, it'll be turning increasingly cloudy and damp with outbreaks of rain moving through, persistent but also quite heavy over the hills. For all of us though, it is going to be feeling quite chilly out there. We'll see highs of 13 or 14 degrees in the south. As we go through Sunday evening, that cloud and rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland will continue to push in, affecting northwestern parts of England and into Wales later. But as we go into the week, higher pressure does start to dominate, but it'll be quite cloudy still, with temperatures close to average. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, our next guests have been working closely with celebrities and MPs to help clean up
our planet.
Very important. Think Ocean was founded in 2021 with two main goals. One, educating the next generation to make sure that they know when they're growing up that naturally we have to take care of the planet and cleaning pollution that's already in the environment.
Well, joining us now to tell us more is Think Ocean's founder, Hugo Valdez-Vera, and the co-founder, Nolene Mariappan. Really good to see you both this morning. So, Nolene, let's start with you. What is Think Ocean and why did you want to start this back in 2021?
Yes, so Hugo had actually been working on the environment and climate action for quite a long time. When he moved to the UK, he realised that there was a growing problem with plastic pollution and that more needed to be done because people weren't actually seeing the link between plastic, the impact on the environment and climate change. So he founded the organisation and I joined him with three goals, really. Education, looking at technology to scale solutions and looking at how we develop more circular economy programmes. So actually looking at reusing, recycling, actually creating local economies from what people would consider waste.
Hugo, just how bad is plastic pollution around the world, and especially here in the UK?
Well, it is bad, but we don't know the extent of how bad it is. You know, this is not much interest from the bigger players or, you know, some government for us to know every detail of the pollution. So if we know that is from 1 to 10 is 2, probably it's about 6.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 26th of October. This is The Weekend on GB News, and I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon out there. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes, following recent tensions about potential tax rises and his definition of what's a working person. Then several protests are taking place in the capital today, including Unite the Kingdom march organised by Tommy Robinson. We will be there live covering all these protests. And Iranian soldiers have been killed as Israel claims responsibility for the attack in another major escalation, pushing the Middle East closer to regional war. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. But this show is nothing without you and your views. It's my favourite part of the show is talking to all yous lot out there. So get in touch, very simple to do so, gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation. Or just have a chat about anything you want to have a chat about. Basically, it's the weekend after all. Keeping me company this hour is political commentators Matthew Stadlen and Emma Ware. Team Redheaded, I've just described you. I think I can say that.
I don't understand how can you claim to be a redhead?
I don't know, but I like
strawberry blonde.
Maybe I identify as. What are you going to do about it, Matthew?
Exactly. Okay. Oh my God, they're roaring already. Okay, but first, before these two kick off, let's get the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the UK is monitoring the live situation and warned Iran not to respond.
Israel does have the right to defend itself, but we are urging and have been urging all sides to show restraint. Iran should not respond. We will continue to work with allies to de-escalate the situation across the region.
In other news, the Prime Minister has denied he was plotting a war against Middle Britain after suggestions that those who make an income from property or shares do not fall within his definition of working people. It comes after the Chancellor insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person and could be among those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the upcoming budget. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has given a press conference as the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa draws to a close after the UK failed to keep language on reparations out of the joint statement signed by attending nations. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the issue, insisting that there had been no discussions about money at the summit. The Prime Minister downplayed the prominence of repatriation justice on the agenda, saying talks about climate resilience had instead been the absolute priority. Political activist Tommy Robinson is missing his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Hundreds of protesters have started walking down Victoria Street towards Parliament Square for the rally. Some demonstrators are wearing an I Am Peter Lynch badge in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. Now, a man remains in custody on suspicion of attempted murder after a woman and 2 children suffered stab wounds in a truly shocking incident. Police were called to Dagenham, where they found the woman in her 30s, an 8-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy, all suffering from stab wounds. While the girl's injuries are not life-threatening, the conditions of the woman and the boy remain unknown. Detectives say those involved were known to each other and they are not seeking any further suspects. And the mother of a teenager killed in Nottingham stabbings has branded an episode of BBC Panorama as shameful. Emma Webber, whose 19-year-old son Barnaby was killed last year, says the families were not properly consulted about the episode. The documentary featured an interview with the killer's family and has now been nominated for a range of journalism awards.
He loved his family and we love him and we miss him so much that I don't think there's any words that could ever convey how much that boy is loved and missed. But what we will do is we will get justice. Wes Streeting wrote to the Director General of the BBC with his concerns when he found out a week before that this was airing and that we hadn't been involved. You know, that there's no duty of care to us, despite what they say in their right to reply statement. And I can't believe that that's our BBC that have done that to us. You would think that Panorama would have learned from past mistakes.
The BBC has responded with a statement. We have the deepest sympathy for the families, and the Panorama team has been extremely mindful of the sensitivities in handling this programme. This investigation was very much in the public interest, and the documentary has been produced in accordance with the BBC's editorial guidelines. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sophia. OK, let's get straight into today's story. We've got a packed show for you, so you don't want to move a muscle because we're going live to the protests in London, which lots of you are already getting in touch with about, and I will read as many of your messages out as I can as we go through the day. Now, there's an increased police presence in the capital as several demonstrations are taking place in London. The protest, organised on behalf of Tommy Robinson under the name Uniting the Kingdom, is expected to be met with a counter-protest organised by the Stand Up to Racism group. We have our GB News reporter Sophie Rupert live in London for you. Sophie, where are you and what's happening behind you?
Well, Dawn, we're here at Piccadilly where the protest, the Stand Up to Racism protest, has just finished forming up right behind us. We're expecting them to set off any second now. There are thousands of people gathered down Regent Street with signs, placards, flags, you name it, as we would expect with the protest, there's someone with a bullhorn making loud announcements. You can see they've even got inflatables on this protest. So any minute now we are expecting this particular protest to set off. And now this one in particular today was set up as a counter-protest to another protest that's taking place here in the capital city today, the Uniting the Kingdom protest, which has been, of course, linked with Tommy Robinson. Now, Tommy Robinson won't be present there today. We've seen pictures of thousands who'd gathered at Victoria making their way down to Parliament Square. Tommy Robinson will not be present because he has been remanded in custody on a contempt charge. We are expecting now here on Regent Street to get going any second. As you can imagine, the noise here is incredibly loud, and they will make their way round down Haymarket, and they will be ending up at Whitehall. There are, of course, other protests taking place here in London today. There's a Uniting Friends and Family protest which gathered at Trafalgar, and they then made their way down to Downing Street. So there are questions about what happens when all of these groups meet. I think we are now about to get underway, so we'll just start walking so we don't get run down by the protest. The family of Chris Cabba are making their way to Downing Street today to hand a letter into the Prime Minister regarding their son's death. Of course, he was shot by a police officer. But here, this one today, we thought it was about to get going, but it seems there's been some kind of stall for some reason once again. They are delayed in setting off. The Met Police were hoping to have them on their way by 1 o'clock. These timings, of course, very, very strict to try and minimise any kind of trouble. As I was saying earlier, the Met Police have drafted in forces from across the UK to try and offer additional support. We've seen hundreds of police officers, we've seen police vans at this particular protest, and I imagine it's a similar story based on pictures we've seen from the other protests online. But the police will want to get this one moving as soon as possible because they need to get them down to their final location at Whitehall because all of these protests today, they have to be dispersed by 6 p.m. That is the regulation that the Met Police have put in place today to make sure that those are dispersed in a timely manner. Apologies. We are waiting still for this one to get going. Thousands of people here at Regent Street will be making their way, I imagine very shortly, on this protest towards Whitehall.
OK, Sophie, just very quickly, what sort of placards and banners are we seeing there today?
We're seeing all manner of placards and banners. As I was telling you earlier, Dawn, we're seeing lots in reference to refugees being welcome here, opening the borders and no to deportations. We've seen several placards with the phrase oppose Tommy Robinson on. Of course, this, as I said, this one was set up to counter-protest the Tommy Robinson linked protest Uniting the Kingdom. We're seeing lots of Palestinian flags, lots of support for Palestine, Free Palestine, here today as well. Lots of unions here as well. You're seeing the PCS there, we're seeing the NEU, lots of support today. But as I said, there's also lots of support for the other protest on the other side of London.
OK, Sophie, thank you very much. Sophie Reaper there from the protest currently taking place in London. She will be bringing us up to date with what's going on. Please do stay with us, and if we get any developments, we'll bring you straight to them straight away. OK, and now let's see what my panel make of this. I have Matthew Stadlen and Emma Webb with me. Emma, there's 4 protests going on in London today. You and I were just discussing just now how many people there were attending the marches. My train coming in was full of people with flags on of various descriptions. What do you make about the fact that the Tommy Robinson March for shorthand was organised and then the counter-protest was organised almost sort of like as an antagonistic move?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think we've seen at previous marches when there have been enormous crowds for pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine rallies, and you know, very, very large marches, lots of, let's say, questionable placards and chanting, and even the presence of straightforward Islamist groups. But at the same time, we've seen people being arrested for holding up signs saying Hamas are terrorists on the grounds of public order, because that would antagonise the much larger rally that's taking place. And so the police have had this attitude towards protesting where they have actually targeted the little guy rather than focusing on keeping their right to counter-protest safe. We also saw this with cases where staff members from the Campaign for Anti-Semitism were asked to, you know, leave the area because it might be regarded as antagonistic to the pro-Palestine rallies. So it'd be interesting to see in the policing of this, particularly with all the accusations of two-tier policing, whether or not this counter-protest is regarded in the same way as being, you know, antagonistic, a threat to public order. Of course, everybody has the right to protest. From Sophie Reaper's description there, it's quite clear that this is a complete powder keg. And as we were saying before we were on air, Dawn, this patriotic protest is absolutely massive. I mean, the thing was already starting to move off just out of sheer pressure almost 90 minutes before it was scheduled to move off, because there were just so many people there. Very difficult to get a crowd to reverse, of course. So I think just by looking at this footage, obviously I can't see exactly how many people are there, but this is a much smaller counter-protest than the size of the main rally.
Okay, Matthew.
I think everyone has a right to protest within the law, fundamental to our democracy. I just worry a little bit about what these people on the Stephen Yaxley-Lennon march have got going on in their lives. You know, I feel a little bit sorry for them.
It is a Saturday. I mean,
yeah, I mean, if these people are convinced that they're patriots, rather than, say, supporters of the far right or racists or bigots or whatever else it might be. I was at Wembley last night with my goddaughter. I went to watch England women, the Lionesses, play against the German women. Fantastic game, but Wembley wasn't full. There were plenty of spare seats there. The tickets were not expensive, not expensive. Some sports grounds, as you know, a big sports fan yourself, are hugely expensive. Go and support England's women play football, or watch the cricket. This morning, if you've got Sky Sports, or
why are you saying?
I don't understand why people.
That's a very weird tangent.
I don't understand. What I'm saying is, I'm deeply patriotic. I love my country. I think England is a great nation. I think Britain is a great country. I don't understand why you would go to London to demonstrate in the name of someone who doesn't even call himself what his real name was or is, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon. Calls himself Tommy Robinson. This is a man who spent time in prison because he's a convicted criminal. He is on the extreme fringes of our society. He is someone who asks his fans for money and then goes and suns himself on a beach. Do something with your lives. Don't go and march for this false messiah, because that's what he is.
Well, would you say, though, Emma, these people are protesting about what they perceive to be the decline of our society?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that when, whether it's a march or whether it's public disorder, people tend to be quite charitable when it comes to talking about the motivations that cause people to go out onto the streets. But for some reason, when you have a large gathering of white British people, particularly white British people with working class accents, the first thing that people jump to is, oh, they must be far right. And there's this sort of attitude of not wanting to actually listen to what they're saying. So when we saw people out on the streets marching for pro-Palestine causes, or even people who were out effectively for pro-Hamas reasons, because Israel at that point hadn't even retaliated, so it couldn't have been about a ceasefire, we had people saying, oh, well, you know, it's because they've got these various grievances. But in this case, you know, people aren't making the same argument, oh, they're not all, you know, they're not all far right just because there's an association with Tommy Robinson or there is a presence of far right people at a certain march. People are across the country really very concerned about all sorts of issues, two-tier policing, immigration, and it's a problem for our democracy that there is no outlet for that. So it's strange to me, Matthew, that you would say that you believe in people's right to protest and then you would denigrate the motivations of those going out to protest.
I believe that their right to protest, so long as they protest within the law. I just feel sorry for this bunch of people, as I do, by the way, for people who support Hamas.
But why not talk to them about their motivations for being there?
Because I'm talking to you on GB News. Let me explain, OK? If you go on one of those pro-Palestine marches, which I didn't touch with a barge pole for the very straightforward reason that I knew that there would be quite a strong presence, whether explicit or implicit, of anti-Semitism. And I've got no time for anti-Semitism as someone who's half Jewish myself, right? But a lot of those people who went on the pro-Palestinian marches were not supporters of Hamas. They couldn't bear the suffering that was being beamed into our TVs and onto our social media feeds in Gaza. Now, it's a deeply complicated situation in the Middle East, and we can discuss that if you want us to later on. But there's an obvious difference between people who are going to protest because they see so many people dying in Gaza, so long as they don't support Hamas, proscribed terrorist organisation, so long as they do so within the law, and people who go out under the banner of Stephen Yaxley Lennon chanting, as we've heard, because I've seen some of the footage, "Oh, Tommy Robinson." This moronic nonsense. This is a bad man, Tommy Robinson. He's a convicted criminal. He wants to scrounge off his own fans while he suns himself on the beach. And listen, guys, please don't, either of you, I'm sure you won't, defend Tommy Robinson. He is on the far, far, far fringes of our society.
No, I mean, I've been watching some of the various live streams of independent journalists this morning, and it's clear that there are a lot of people there who are just there because they're concerned about the state of our country. And so I think that there's almost an element of class snobbery about this. Like, you know, you can say, well, you know, there'll be some people who went to the pro-Hamas protests who were just concerned about various issues.
A lot.
Yes,
I'd say
and fine.
The great majority.
If you don't want to be associated with Tommy Robinson or Hizb ut-Tahrir, don't go on the marches. But the point is that there are people there who clearly are there because they're concerned about various things.
And it seems to me,
I just want to finish my point. It seems to me imbecilic to suggest that we just ignore the motivations behind... Because, yes, some people are chanting about Tommy Robinson, but this is clearly an absolutely enormous mark.
Unfortunately, we are running...
But she's called me imbecilic. Can I just quickly respond? Very, very quickly.
I didn't. I said that the point was imbecilic.
No, OK.
Just very, very quickly, Matthew.
Those pro-Palestinian marches, as I said, didn't touch them in the barge pole. They were not organised by Hizb ut-Tahrir or whatever the name of this organisation is. This march was organised by Tommy Robinson. If you don't want to be described as far right, don't go on a Tommy Robinson march.
OK, right, we're going to leave it there. Lots of you have got very strong opinions on this one as well, and please do keep those coming in. Now, we will be coming back to this subject throughout the show, so don't go anywhere. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, please do go to our website, which is gbnews.com. Now, we're going to move on quickly. We are going to talk about... Keir Starmer, yes, and Keir Starmer and working people. This is GB News. Don't go too far. We'll see you very soon.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
National Trust Director General has said something rather curious. She's admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Yes, this was speaking at a Labour Party fringe event. The boss of the charity, Hilary McGrady, acknowledged that there was a gap between her staff's views and the views held by the wider public. So was she being honest? Joining me now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadelman-Koo, who I believe is with me. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Can this be true?
The founders of the National Trust and later figures involved in it, like my hero James Lees-Milne, were really motivated by love of nation. But I think that love of nation in the Trust has become actively, you know, national self-loathing. And that's really the state of modern Britain. And with the Trust, I mean, what we've done is we've actually entrusted our national heritage to those people who actually actively despise our national heritage. And it's, you know, it's utter madness.
Have these people wanted to take over charities like the National Trust for their political ends, or is it just something that happens? Is it just the type of people who work in charities?
This has been part of the long march through the institutions, that people need to understand that Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. So the buildings that house our institutions look the same, but the people who now run them bear no comparison to the generations who lovingly built and ran them. They are cuckoos in the nest, and we need to understand that. And of course, once you realize that, of course, that explains completely why, the National Trust and others have crudely tried to denigrate our national heroes and link them and their houses to colonialism and slavery, as they ludicrously tried to do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. This is The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes following recent tensions about the potential tax rises and his definition of what a working person is. Feel free to bang your head against anything I am currently as well. The Prime Minister also addressed the issue of reparations, stating that conversations around reparatory justice had been agreed at the summit, but that none around money. He spoke earlier. This is what he had to say.
I should be really clear here. In the 2 days we've been here, none of the discussions have been about money. Our position is very, very clear in relation to that.
Yes, OK. Joining me now is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster, who has the absolute delight of explaining what actually Keir Starmer said today.
Good afternoon, Dawn. Well, I think on the issue of reparations, that is reasonably clear in that the government have said there's been no discussions about money. They're not going to be paying reparations to the many Commonwealth countries who really would rather like up to 18 trillion, it has been suggested. That is not going to happen, not least because we couldn't begin to afford it. But there has been a mention in this joint communiqué signed by all these 56 countries at the end of the summit, referring to reparatory justice. So what I think we're likely to see going forward is supporting these countries further in terms of dealing with climate change. Many of these are small island nations really very badly affected by climate change already, and also helping with increasing trade ties and potentially wiping off some long-term debt.
Catherine, what does... I feel like, they've gone out there, they've had lots of chit-chat, but I don't feel like anything has actually been achieved. I don't feel satisfied that I know any more about what Keir Starmer's plans are about reparations. All right, it doesn't involve money, but it's still a little bit vague.
Well, sure, but, at least he's actually gone, and he did point out he's the first sitting British Prime Minister to have gone and visited a Pacific island like Samoa, which is quite something. And of these 56 Commonwealth countries, there's a lot of very big no-shows. India being one, South Africa being another, Canada being another. Now, in the case of South Africa and India, they didn't go because they decided instead to go to the BRIC summit, where they were mingling with Vladimir Putin. So I do think the Prime Minister does deserve some credit for the fact that he's taken the time to go. Now, he will say there's going to be increased cooperation on trade, on climate change, on Royal Navy patrols in the South Pacific. So he will tell you he has made progress. Of course, a lot of these summits where they jet off around the world is about being seen to be there. They will say that there is a value in that, going to meet people physically. And of course, this summit only happens every couple of years.
OK, Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Emma, are you satisfied by what has been achieved or not achieved? I'm still a bit vague, personally.
In terms of
the reparations and what Keir Starmer was doing out there, and
I mean, on the reparations, I think it's extremely frustrating because anybody who's actually familiar with the history of it, the fact that I saw yesterday, I think her name's Laura Trevelyan, just one of the women from one of the families who have actually paid reparations, tweeting about this and saying that Keir Starmer should apologise on behalf of the whole UK. Well, the reality is actually that the British taxpayer paid what would be the equivalent today of close to 20 billion. The entire body of the British public, through their taxpayer money, paid to compensate the small number of 3,000 slave-owning families like Laura Trevelyan's. So actually, we have already, all of us, people who are paying taxes up to 2015, have in effect paid to abolish slavery. It was the only way to expedite the process. It was the only sort of way. No, we can argue about this separately, but the point that I want to make is that, you know, even that I was just reading an academic article on the Cambridge University website about how 5,000 British Navy lost their lives in trying to abolish the slave trade. So no, I don't think that we should be paying reparations. I think that it's a cash grab. I don't think you can operate a system like this where everybody has to pay historical reparations to each other for various damages, because it's endlessly complex. And in any case, my final point would be that the British taxpayer now is of incredibly complicated provenance.
Yes.
My ancestors certainly didn't own slaves. They were busy, you know, in the dark down a pit mining coal. So, you know, why should somebody today who has emigrated from wherever have to pay their taxpayer money to pay reparations? And yes, some people will say, well, this isn't actually, you know, making a payment to another country, but we're talking about cancelling debt here. So it's effectively the same thing.
Matthew, we are not handing over any cash. Are you happy with that, or do you think we should be handing
Just
over?
quickly on Emma's point, we have not paid reparations for slavery. We paid off slave owners when we were in the process when we were in the process of stopping slavery, and we were absolutely neck deep in slavery. So the idea that by paying slave owners because they were no longer allowed to own human beings, that somehow is tantamount to paying reparations for slavery is obviously nonsense.
Didn't say that.
On the issue of reparations, I can't see how they would work in practice. I even have an issue with the moral case, because the people who deserve the reparations are the human beings that we enslaved and that other countries enslaved historically themselves, and they're dead, tragically. So I don't see how reparations work. I mean, has Germany paid enough reparations to the Jews? You know, how much reparations does my family get for being kicked out of Vienna by the Nazis? The Austrians certainly haven't paid anywhere near enough in reparations. Who else pays reparations? Do countries in Africa, because some of their populations in the past were complicit in slavery, do they start paying reparations? Who ends up receiving these reparations? And so it goes on. Do we start having reparations between England and France, or Britain and France, for historic wars? I don't think it is practical.
So it's not practical, it's not a good idea. So you're happy with what Keir Starmer has come back with?
I mean, personally, I cannot see a problem, and I don't think it means that we are thereby liable to pay reparations, to hand over money. I can't see a problem with Starmer reiterating what I think we've already done as a country, which is to say we are deeply sorry as a country, not as individuals, not as any of us, of course, but deeply sorry as a country for our role in one of the most shameful periods of human history.
Emma?
I think that on principle, you can't apologise for the, you know, and like I say, you can't. I was going to say you can't apologise for the sins of your ancestors, and I agree with you. I think that the only way really that reparations can work is if they are within the present generation in a very straightforward way of sort of like, you know, paying paying money to somebody who has been wronged in some respect. You can't do this 300, 400 years, 500 years after the fact. A good example of the complexity of this is someone like Angela Davis, who's one of the kind of leading black radicals. When she did an ancestry test, found out that, one of these family tree programs, found out that she's actually descended from some of the people who came over to America on the Mayflower. And I think it was Douglas Murray who made a joke about the fact that she would have to take money out of one pocket and put it in the other. Well, so these things are incredibly complex. And just to Matthew's point, I think you slightly misrepresented what I was saying there. And I think we can have it probably would make very interesting television, but we can have a historical debate about the necessity of compensating slave owners as a way of expediting the process of abolishing slavery. I think the abolition of slavery is something that we should be incredibly proud of. And in fact, a recent poll found that amongst ethnic minorities in this country, one of the aspects of our history that they are most proud of is the abolition of slave trade.
If we are capable of, and you would encourage us to be, and I would agree, proud of the good bits of our history, and there have been many, many good bits in our history, not least defeating Nazism, our role in defeating Nazism. If we're capable of being proud of that, surely we are capable of feeling shame. And if and not individually, but as a society. And if we're capable of feeling shame, I see no shame and no problem in, as a country, with a past, with a history that we own, not as individuals, apologising again for what was an utterly shameful period of human history.
But can I just very quickly? Can I just say that the thing is that I think that history is incredibly complicated, and I am absolutely not diminishing the horrors of slavery. But when we're talking about things like empire, the history of humanity is the history of empire. We never talk about the Ottoman Empire, for example.
We do, of course we do.
Not quite in the same way. But
how can we feel pride but not shame?
Just very quickly, we do have to finish.
So the point that I'm trying to make is that history is incredibly complicated.
It is.
And won't necessarily make interesting television to argue about it. But the fact remains that we are the only nation in human history who has made such a concerted effort as a people to abolish slavery.
So feel pride, but also feel shame then, right?
Like I said, history is complicated.
So we can feel both.
Right, OK, that is time. Unfortunately, thank you very much for that. I'm Dawn Lees from Mrs GBNews. There's loads more coming up on today's show. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. It's 1:34. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has warned Iran not to respond after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest and the UK is monitoring the live situation. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer has denied he was plotting a war against Middle Britain after suggestions that those who make an income from property or shares do not fall within his definition of working people. It comes after the Chancellor insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person and could be among those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the upcoming budget. Now, the Prime Minister has given a press conference as the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa draws to a close after the UK failed to keep language on reparations out of a joint statement signed by attending nations. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the issue, insisting that there had been no discussions about money at the summit. The Prime Minister downplayed the prominence of repatriatory justice on the agenda of the gathering, saying talks about climate resilience had instead been the absolute priority. Back in the UK, political activist Tommy Robinson is missing his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Thousands of Tommy Robinson supporters are marching towards Parliament Square in central London for the rally. Some demonstrators are wearing an I Am Peter Lynch badge in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We have a three-way split in the weather today. Sunny for some, grey in the southeast, with rain in the northwest. Having a look at the bigger picture then, we've got frontal systems towards the southeast bringing cloudier skies here, and then we have this cold front bringing increasing amounts of cloud towards the north and west. So a damp afternoon for some of us, especially towards the southeast, patchy outbreaks of rain, cloudier skies here, and towards the northwest, this band of more persistent and heavy rain moving southeastwards. But in between, across much of northern England, Wales and the southwest of England, plenty of sunshine on offer, and we could see highs reaching up to 15 or 16 degrees. So as we go through Saturday afternoon, we have bands of heavy rain pushing its way southeastwards across much of Scotland. Behind that, blustery showers coming through and also turning much chillier. Across Northern Ireland, some early evening sunshine across the far west, but outbreaks of rain still continuing to push their way south and eastwards. Some early evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the southwest of England, but across parts of the southeast staying cloudy here, but the cloud will gradually ease. We may see some mist and fog developing, and then this band of cloud and rain will sink its way southwards into parts of Wales, into the Midlands, but generally starts fizzling out as it does so to bring many places a dry and clear night, but it will be feeling colder out there. So as we start Sunday morning, it will be a bright but chilly start to the day. Any mist and fog patches are soon lifting. So that leaves plenty of autumnal sunshine out there across much of England and Wales, but another system moving through, so bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland to end Sunday, feeling chillier for all of us, highs of 14 degrees. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, let's have a look at some of the other stories in the news today. And the big question on the lips of everybody is, what is a working person? This is the new Brexit, isn't it? Working person. Working person. It's just like, it's all some sort of mantra that we have to...
Can I tell you who is not a working person?
Go on, I don't even know what a working person is anymore, Matthew.
The people who are sadly, tragically, dispiritingly not working people are England's batsmen.
Right.
Because they
I wasn't expecting
they
that.
crumbled to defeat in Pakistan overnight. I woke up to the most horrific headlines.
Right.
He's got all the weird tangents today.
Not weird. Come on, everyone watching
us.
GB News, surely everyone watching the People's Channel is interested in the fortunes of our England cricket team.
Yes, of course we are. OK, but going back onto the subject, Emma, you did the Telegraph today, by the way, people have done this brilliant Working Person of the Year quiz. It's not, it's just, are you a working person? I've just made that last bit up. But it's actually good fun. And there are only 6 questions. Go online and answer those questions. Emma and I both did it, and...
I started to do it. Sorry.
Just good gosh almighty.
I don't want to be left out.
Right, you won't. Honestly, we'll come back to you. God, I'm having a child. OK, we both did this quiz. We both failed miserably. We're both obviously not working people.
I would be interested to know what you have to say in response to this quiz to actually be one of Keir Starmer's working people, because I get the sense the only way that you qualify as a working person is if you have one job and live hand to mouth, and have no savings, don't invest in the future at all, are not prudent. I effectively have come out as being not a working person because I have too many jobs, because I work too many hours, I work for myself. I work on lots of different projects, and I'm not sort of employed in a normal 9-to-5 job. That means that I'm not a working person, which is just an absurd suggestion. It was an excellent article in today's Telegraph about landlords, and this landlord saying, look, I work, I think he said like 90 hours a week or something. To be a landlord, to be a sort of like small-time landlord, and to run that as your business is it's not the sort of stereotypical socialist Mr. Moneybags.
Look, you start waffling on about cricket. Come on, guys, we're girls. We can identify.
Come on, Emma, get off of the point.
Are you a working
we don't need any more
person,
identification jokes. Listen, I tried to take that test this morning, actually, as a reader of the Telegraph. I'd like to see what's going on both sides of the political debate.
Course.
I answered one of the questions wrong, and so I wasn't able to complete the quiz. However...
How can you answer the questions wrong, Matthew? They were really, really simple.
Because I was a landlord in the past, and I am no longer a landlord, and I ticked that, yes, I am a landlord box, but I'm not a landlord. Right, moving on.
Mr. Moneybags over here with his property portfolio.
You literally just talked about small-time landlords.
Oh,
anyway.
Sweetie, it's a sense of humour.
I'm laughing.
Ooh, controversial.
Now, can I just make the point here? We all know what Starmer and Labour, let's be honest about it, meant by working people.
No, we don't.
All right.
That's the problem. None of us know.
May I attempt to answer it, please?
Oh, God, how long you got?
I know Starmer's struggling under this intense scrutiny that he's been put under.
He doesn't know what a woman is, though, does he?
Oh, now, come on. Let's not make jokes, because that's a serious thing for a lot of people. Look, the issue on what is a working person, what did he say, what did Labour say when they talked about working people in the manifesto, and before the election they said it means no rise to national insurance. Yes, it would be controversial if they do rise national insurance for employers' contributions. I accept that is an issue of controversy. But
it's a bit sneaky.
Look,
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. But just what do they mean by working people? No rise in national insurance, at least not for employees. No rise in VAT, and no rise in income tax. No one before the election was talking about whether or not they would raise taxes on shares, whether or not they would raise taxes on landlords. We all knew what they meant, or we should have known what they meant by working people in the context of what they talked about specifically about the taxes that would not be raised.
I mean, that whole thing about national insurance is just a nonsense, because it's going to make it harder for smaller employers, isn't it? Because it's going to make it more expensive for them to hire
people. They're not working people.
Well, actually, this was going to be my point, which is that I think the real issue here is who doesn't qualify as a working person. If you're a small business owner,
that's me.
If you're a small business owner and you are, you've put all of your savings into starting your company, you've sacrificed a lot to own a small business, to own a small number of employees, and perhaps you don't even pay yourself a salary. Perhaps you pay yourself in dividends, which, the taxes might rise on dividends, or the tax-free allowance on dividends might reduce even further. And this is persecuting people who work really, really hard. We're not talking about some kind of aristocracy, like I say, this kind of... yes, I'm sure there are some landlords who are the sort of like stereotypical Mr. Moneybags, but there are lots of landlords who are retired people who have invested in maybe one property.
Who would you tax, Emma?
Who would I tax? I mean, that's a difficult question.
Cricket fans, that might.
No, but it's an important question. That's what Rachel raised. It's really a big issue because everyone is waiting with bated breath about what's going to happen in this budget. We've been told it's going to basically be some... Quickly make the point. We've been told that it's going to be medicine swallowing. Okay, dish out the way because of the neglect in various ways, in the ways in which the Tory party, the Tory government, successive Tory governments ran down this country. Plus, yes, the pandemic and the war in Ukraine all had a big impact, and Brexit, of course, although that was, you might argue, a Tory brainchild. The issue here is our public services are in disarray. Not all of them, and there are hugely hard-working people in them, but our NHS, the people who watch this show, many of them will have been languishing on an NHS waiting list. If not them, they're for social care, and so on and so on and so on. Now, we all want growth. That is the centrepiece of this Labour government. If there is not growth, serious growth, by the time of the next election, Labour will not win that election. So they want growth. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and if it doesn't happen overnight, how do you invest in your public services if you don't borrow more and or raise more taxes?
This is Emma, very quickly.
This is not going to lead to growth because this is going to damage small businesses. It's going to chase the wealthy away from society. So that's a whole separate issue. You asked me the question, who would I tax? Well, I don't know who I would tax, but my at least starting point would be to make certain efficiencies. For example, I think the civil service is far too large. I think the administration is completely bloated. So
you mentioned international aid budget.
I think there are ways. I think there are. Well,
it's not enough. It's not enough.
That would be a different argument.
We have to go there. But well, you two have been a star turn. Thank you very much indeed for that. Blimey. Matthew Stadlen and Emma Webb, thank you both so much for being a brilliant, feisty panel. Do you agree with either of them? gbnews.com/your say. Get involved. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's packed show. We'll be talking about the King's time in Samoa and his awkward interactions over those reparations. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Young adults spend a few years living away from home at university, those who go to university, but many then have no choice but to move back in with their parents because of the rising cost of renting.
But is this an excuse, and are Gen Z or Z just being lazy?
No, I mean, what do you make of it, Debbie? Because we do have to have some sympathy, don't we, in that, you know, rents are very high, it's very hard to get a mortgage, there are issues there.
I think the push towards young people to go to university as well is not necessarily the right thing for a lot of people, and I think people should start work early. These guys leave their universities with a huge amount of debt, no jobs, or huge rent. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. So I think we've got to look at the work ethic and start it younger. Because I think it's so easy just to move back with your mum and dad, isn't it?
To speak like a Gen Zer, they would say that, well, it's OK for your generation, you had it easy.
Realistically, that isn't quite that true, because a lot of people then didn't go to university. This is a relatively new thing that everybody goes to university.
I have to say, what strikes me today is that you still have, amongst all these problems, not having enough money, going to university when perhaps you shouldn't be, all these sort of issues, you still get all these people saying, well, I'm going to have a year out.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. And I think the thing is, they say, oh, it was easy for you, but it wasn't really. We still had to rent places.
But the thing is with this debate, Debbie, is the generation we're talking about, Gen Z, who we're accusing of being lazy, have been raised by our generation.
Yeah.
So what have we done wrong that, if they are lazier, has made them like that?
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. And remember, keep those comments coming in. Lots of love in the room. Not for Matthew Stadlen, our previous commentator there, who Yeah, handbags at dawn, I think, as Tony summed it up very well. Now, let's talk about the royals, shall we? During a Commonwealth summit in Samoa, King Charles addressed the painful legacy of colonialism, urging member nations to confront historical injustices. He acknowledged that some of the most painful aspects of the Commonwealth's history still resonate today, indirectly addressing calls for reparations for slavery. Joining me to discuss this is royal commentator Jack Stooks. Jack, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. What do you make of how King Charles and Queen Camilla have done over their tour? I mean, obviously in Australia first and then latterly in Samoa.
Well, obviously, we know that we didn't know. Well, first of all, we didn't know this was going to continue to take place once we realised how unwell the king actually has been. They carried on. They wanted the tour to continue, so they had to make adjustments and changes in order for him to go out. He was adamant that he wanted to continue the trip. As head of state to Australia, you know, it's been quite an amazing thing for them to have him come over. There's been good and bad publicity in Australia. I think generally the majority of Australia like him as head of state. Obviously, there's other people in Australia who don't see it quite the same. And as we saw in Australia, it was very much vocalized. We saw it here. So it sort of comes with the territory, I think. You know, the king wanting to go out and say, look, I'm here as your head of state. And there's people in Australia who think differently. They don't think that he should be head of state. And I think it's important that he did speak about it in Samoa, that he said, you know, we can't sort of fix the past. The past has happened, but we can sort of go forward in the future and actually change things for the better in the future, which I don't think is an unfair thing to have said. I think it's an amazing thing that he's even brought it up, because I'm sure people would have said to him, look, just keep veering away from the subject, don't talk about it. But I think him being the person that he is has gone, no, I want to talk about it. So he has brought it up. It's discussion that's on the table now. And I think he's going to get back to England. And I think that going forward, when visiting these countries and speaking with Commonwealth leaders, it's going to be more and more on the agenda.
Jack, you work with him, you know him fairly well. I mean, it's a very determined man, isn't he? I mean, you know, obviously he's been having cancer treatment. His cancer treatment continues when he gets back to the... It's quite a tough tour to have undertaken for any of us.
I think, I mean, even, you know, you or I going to Australia, you get there and you're sort of quite tired for the first week almost. But he's gone out, and I mean, he hit the ground running. He had one day off when he first arrived, which isn't much, especially, like you say, at his age. Most people in the country here are retired by his age, and he's only just starting the job that the Queen left him to continue on with. I think, you know, taking the Queen out as well to go and meet people of Australia.
Jack, we have to finish there. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. We have to go to the weather, and here it is with Catherine.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We've got a three-way split in the weather today. Rain in the northwest, sunnier for most towards the south, but it will be turning chillier for all of us on Sunday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got frontal systems out towards the south and east, but a cold front towards the northwest. And here we have heavy spells of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across Scotland, but later into northwest England, into Wales, but it will gradually sink its way southwards and start fizzling out. We may see some mist and fog patches across the southeast early through this evening, but those should clear. And in many places tonight, seeing a clear night, but temperatures will drop. We may see some mist and fog, but also some pockets of frost. So a colder but brighter start out there through Sunday for many of us. There will be some showers, especially across northern parts of Scotland, quite blustery as they move through. But across many places, still seeing some sunshine, but feeling colder out there there to start Sunday morning, and then we have cloud and rain coming through across western parts later into Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, though, across much of England and Wales, plenty of sunshine to start the day. And we hold on to that sunshine across much of England and Wales through Sunday, so plenty of autumnal sunshine out there. But further towards the west, especially across Northern Ireland and Scotland, it'll be turning increasingly cloudy and damp with outbreaks of rain moving through, persistent but also quite heavy over the hills. For all of us, though, it is going to be feeling quite chilly out there. We'll see highs of 13 or 14 degrees in the south. As we go through Sunday evening, that cloud and rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland will continue to push in, affecting northwestern parts of England and into Wales later. But as we go into the week, higher pressure does start to dominate, but it'll be quite cloudy still, with temperatures close to average. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Sleep Report 2024 is based on a comprehensive survey conducted all across the country, and the report found that over half the population, get this, falls short of the recommended 7+ hours of required sleep each night. And shockingly, 1 in 4 of us is getting 5 hours or less. I think that includes you, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm very bad at sleep. 4 or 5, I'd say.
That's
a bit
awful.
like Maggie Thatcher. What would you get on average?
I'd say at least 6. 7 probably average.
That's probably not good. I think you probably need 8. Well, almost half of Brits rate their sleep quality as 5 out of 10 or lower.
Dr Manesh Shah and Dr Sita Shah joins us now to tell us all about the sleep and how Brits are struggling. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
First questions to you both. How many hours do you both get?
God, I think it varies. I try and hit that 7 hours of sleep.
Why are Brits so bad at getting sleep, especially in terms of hours? 4 or 5 hours for me, 6 hours for you. It's the same for everybody out there in the UK. We're just not going to bed early enough. Is it as simple as that? Or is it slightly more complicated?
Yeah, so I think the key is to establish a good routine. So waking up at the same time every day, making sure that you're going to sleep at the same time every day, and being quite sort of rigid and strict with yourself when it comes to those timings.
And also, it's not just the length of, I get, say, 7 hours, it's the quality, isn't it? You've got different phases of sleep.
Yeah.
Just explain those. Is it, as far as I remember, REM, deep sleep? Just tell us about that.
Correct, yeah. So, essentially, there's 4 stages to sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2, which are your lighter stages of sleep. And then stage 3 is your deeper sleep. And then you've got the stage 4, which is your REM. Which is a rapid eye movement stage. And it's the stage 3 and the REM sleep which is really, really important for restorative and regenerative sleep.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, it's 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 26th of October. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. This is indeed the weekend on GB News. Packed show for you. Now, several protests are taking place in the capital state, including Unite the Kingdom March, organised by Tommy Robinson. Will be there live. Then Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes, following recent tensions about potential tax rises and his definition of what a working person is. And British tourists face paying more for attractions in France as the country looks to add surcharges for non-EU nationals. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. But this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today or anything you want to have a chat about. To be honest with you, it's very simple to get involved. Just visit gbnews.com/your say and join in our conversation. Cracking final hour for you. Keeping me company is journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and former Conservative Special Advisor Charlie Rowley. But before we get to them and today's stories, let's get the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the UK is monitoring the live situation and warned Iran not to respond.
Israel does have the right to defend itself. But we are urging and have been urging all sides to show restraint. Iran should not respond. We will continue to work with allies to de-escalate the situation across the region.
In other news now, the Prime Minister has denied he was plotting a war against Middle Britain after suggestions that those who make an income from property or shares do not fall within his definition of working people. It comes after the Chancellor insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person and could be among those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the upcoming budget. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has given a press conference as the Commonwealth Summit in Samoa draws to a close after the UK failed to keep language on reparations out of a joint statement signed by attending nations. Sir Keir Starmer addressed the issue, insisting that there had been no discussions about money at the major summit. The Prime Minister downplayed the prominence of reparatory justice on the agenda of the gathering in Samoa, saying talks about climate resilience had instead been the absolute priority. Back in the UK, political activist Tommy Robinson is missing his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Thousands of Tommy Robinson supporters have gathered in Westminster for the rally. Some demonstrators are wearing I Am Peter Lynch badges in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. Meanwhile, hundreds of people have also gathered for a march in central London to protest over deaths in custody alongside the Justice for Chris Cabba campaign. Activists are lining the corner of Trafalgar Square and have begun the planned United Families and Friends campaign march down to Downing Street. The campaign group supports the families of loved ones lost at the hands of custody. The mother of a teenager killed in the Nottingham stabbings has branded an episode of BBC Panorama as shameful. Emma Webber, whose 19-year-old son Barnaby was killed last year, says the families were not properly consulted about the episode. The documentary featured an interview with the killer's family and has now been nominated for a range of journalism awards.
He loved his family and we love him and we miss him so much that I don't think there's any words that could ever convey how much that boy is loved and missed. But what we will do is we will get justice. Wes Streeting wrote to the Director General of the BBC with his concerns when he found out a week before that this was airing and that we hadn't been involved You know, that there's no duty of care to us, despite what they say in their right to reply statement. And I can't believe that that's our BBC that have done that to us. You would think that Panorama would have learned from past mistakes.
The BBC has responded with a statement. We have the deepest sympathy for the families, and the Panorama team has been extremely mindful of the sensitivities in handling this programme. This investigation was very much in the public interest, and the documentary has been produced in accordance with the BBC's editorial guidelines. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Now let's get straight into today's stories, shall we? There's an increased police presence in the capital as several demonstrations are taking place in London today. The protest organised, as you can see on your screens now, on behalf of Tommy Robinson under the name Uniting the Kingdom, is expected to be met with a counter-protest organised by the Stand Up to Racism group. Joining me now live from the protest is GB News reporter Sophie Reaper. Sophie, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on what's happening. I believe both marches have actually started now and are making their way through the capital.
Indeed, when we left you in the last hour, Dawn, we were, of course, waiting for that Stand Up to Racism march to make a move, and they have now done so. We're joining it here as it makes its way into Whitehall. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of people gathering here with all manner of flags, placards and signs. I think in the last couple of moments, we've also just seen the tail end of the United Friends and Families protest, which was a separate organised protest joined by the family today of Chris Cabba as they handed in a letter to Downing Street. So we've just seen the tail end of that protest as well. But the one you're seeing here mainly is the Stand Up to Racism protest. And they are still making their way down. All the way down, you can maybe see Big Ben in the distance there. All the way down Whitehall, it is filled with this particular protest. However, just past the end of Whitehall, where Big Ben is in Parliament Square, there is another protest taking place today. It is the Uniting the Kingdom protest, which has been linked with Tommy Robinson. Of course, he is not there today after he was remanded in custody yesterday, but they say they're standing up to tyranny, whereas this Stand Up to Racism protest was set up as a counter-protest to that one. They say end racism. You'll also see placards that say oppose Tommy Robinson. They believe that is their plan to end racism. You'll see other signs, refugees welcome. We've seen other signs about Islamophobia. We're seeing lots of Palestinian flags here today as well. So, as I say, there are thousands of people here in London and a very, very heavy police presence as they try to marshal all of these protests. There have been a lot of questions about perhaps why they've been allowed to take place on the same day. Are there not risks involved with that? But the police have told us that they've brought in support from around the UK to try and make sure that the protests are kept separate and to try and make sure that there are no trouble.
And indeed, Sophie, they do actually, both protest marches do look relatively peaceful so far. We saw lots of our Union flags and indeed many Israel flags on the Tommy Robinson march. So it all seems to be going quite smoothly so far.
So far, I would say so. Here, people are, of course, they're very vocal. There's lots of chants. There have been some anti-Tommy Robinson chants, for example. But in terms of within the protest itself, things do seem quite calm. And let's just hope it stays that way. That'll certainly be the hope of the Met Police, anyway.
OK, that's GB News reporter Sophie Reaper there, who will be bringing us up to date on the various protests taking place in the capital as the afternoon goes on. And as soon as anything does happen that we need to know about, we will be going straight back to Sophie. OK, now let's see what my panel, Benjamin and Charlie, make of this. Charlie, I'm coming to you first. It doesn't make that much sense to me the Tommy Robinson march was organised first, and then this sort of like the anti-Tommy Robinson march was allowed to go ahead at the same time. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. Why give them the permission to do that?
Well, I mean, all of that is a decision for the police, and the police obviously feel as though that they can manage those numbers. I'm not entirely sure whether they will. We'll just have to wait and see as the protests unfold throughout the day. And bearing in mind, as Sophie was saying, there's a third protest, which is, the Justice for Chris Cabba, which I think is a rather extraordinary sort of protest in itself, given that we now know more details about Chris Cabba and where there is a Metropolitan Police. I mean, putting Metropolitan Police out into the street to police those two protests that we were just talking about, the Tommy Robinson one and the anti-racism one, all the while when, there is a bounty on a police officer's head on the back of the Chris Cabba campaign, it seems to me, is not a smart move, but there you are. That's just the situation. Let's hope it continues to be peaceful. But we live in a country where you should be able to protest, and that is absolutely right. And, of course, there'll be people who came out in protest against the riots that took place across the country in the summer, those that were standing up to anti-racism. Standing up to racism, which is obviously the right thing to do. But what we can't allow ourselves in society is to become so divided and so entrenched in our own views that we lose focus as to why people are protesting in the first place. Now, there is no excuse for the riots that took place in the summer, people that involved themselves in criminal activity that ended up behind bars. Some, we can have a debate about another time about the length of sentencing that some people might have got just by things on Twitter
but this
rather
is
than
different.
things
That was a riot. This is a peaceful protest. I mean, we're looking at scenes now, people sort of like with their union flags. It seems very peaceful.
Exactly, and people who may be supporters of whether it's Tommy Robinson as an individual or not, they are there because they feel as though that the country and the government isn't listening to them when it comes to policing, when there's a two-tier policing system in this country. These are people who are not, or as they are often described, as people on the far right. These are people that may have particular attitudes, and there might be one or two people that you would have assumed to just be resigned to a football match in the 1970s or something. But the majority of people are caring about this country. They care about things like immigration. They care about things like integration. They hear too many stories in our national newspapers about communities that don't get on, communities that are too divided, where there are too many crimes that take place, where there is too much illegal immigration. And bearing in mind, yesterday's figures show that there are more people that have entered this country in small boat crossings this year, and we're not even at the end of this year, compared to last. So the problem is out of control. The government needs to do something about it, and I think the majority of people that are protesting today have that kind of spirit in mind and have an absolute right to protest. And as you say, that would be something that resonates with millions of people across this country.
Yeah, absolutely. But Benjamin, what do you make of that?
Well, I accidentally joined the Tommy Robinson protest earlier today.
Tell us about this one.
They gained a supporter.
Really very unlikely. Well, I live there, right? So, and I came out of my flat, and the protest was going down Victoria Street in central London, which was rather a surprise to me. And I must confess, it made me very nervous because Twitter would suggest these people aren't fond of me. Now, I have to say, a couple of people did recognise me, despite putting a scarf around my face, and they were perfectly nice. So I don't want to say that there was anything aggressive.
It was perfectly peaceful.
It was perfectly peaceful, and people were quite friendly that recognised me, despite my best attempts to not be recognised. But what was very strange was that the police wouldn't let anybody cross the road to the nearby tube station, and so they were making any local residents or anybody going about their business in that area walk with the Tommy Robinson march up the street in the direction of Parliament. So that struck me as pretty unnecessary, and I was slightly anxious that there were going to be photos of me joining it and people being rather perplexed. But it was peaceful.
But what would be wrong with that, to be honest?
Well, I don't support
many of these people are, as Charlie's just alluded to, are simply worried about the direction of travel this country is going in at the moment, which is a perfectly reasonable sentiment.
I think it's unclear what they're protesting about. It was slightly difficult. My cab driver, actually, because I eventually got in a cab to pull myself out of the area, and he said, what are they protesting about? And I wasn't quite sure. They're just saying unite the kingdom, which seems a bit vague to me. But look, there is clearly among the supporters of Tommy Robinson and Tommy Robinson himself a very real vein of xenophobia and of racism that is not typical of people in this country, whether they have a problem with levels of immigration or not. And I don't think, actually, that we should be listening to some of those people on those marches. They're entitled to protest, but I really don't think government should have the ear of people like that.
And I think, but I agree with that. But I also think what gets people going in this country, what grinds their gears, is that there will be so much reporting on this protest, the Tommy Robinson protest, where the sentiment is something that, as I say, we've just talked about, that millions of people across this country care about and think about, but it will get far more coverage, and people will expect that the police to take a much tougher line against people who are protesting today than what you'd see on a Palestinian protest, where you see people that are actively, openly racist, who don't want to agree to the freedoms and the values and the equality that we in this country have, and what they want to see, the majority of people want to see in the Middle East, but the police do nothing about it. And that's the difference, and that's what really grinds people's gears in this country, when they say, of course you can have a protest, of course you've got the right to a freedom of speech, but when you cross the line, whether it's on the far right, as we saw in the riots over the summer, or it might be today, we'll have to wait and see, or if it's in a pro-Palestinian protest where that oversteps the line, and you incite hate and violence, but the police do nothing about it. That is the hypocrisy in this country, and that's what really gets people angry, and I understand that sentiment.
I mean, so far we haven't seen any issues on any of the protests. You're seeing their live footage on the Unite the Kingdom march. It seems very peaceful, as does Unite the Kingdom march. But what we haven't seen, Stand Up to Racism, to give them their correct title, what we haven't seen so far, as Charlie just said, with the pro-Palestinian march, is any offensive and indeed anti-Semitic placards being waved. So we haven't seen that yet. So,
do you know, I do really hate the way that each side seems to co-opt one of those countries. There were many Israeli flags on the Tommy Robinson one I walked through, and we can see in these images many Palestinian flags from the other side. I really am not convinced that any of these people are doing anything to help the people that are actually affected by this in the Middle East, and I really wish we wouldn't co-opt either side for our own internal domestic arguments. I find it quite unedifying, to be honest. I really think half of the people with Palestinian flags in their hands wouldn't last a minute in Gaza under the rule of Sharia law, and quite frankly, a lot of the people holding Israeli flags, I suspect wouldn't be celebrated or welcomed by many Jewish people in this country who are hypersensitive to racism because of their own lives and their own recent history.
Do you think, Charlie, that many people on the Unite the Kingdom march today will simply be wanting to have their voice heard? They feel like their voices are not being heard by the political parties. And this isn't just a one-party thing, the political parties in this country.
I do think that's true, and I think, look, regardless of the mainstream political parties and the government, you're absolutely right. I think there have just been for too many problems for far too long that haven't been addressed, that no party seems to have grappled with. That's why the Tories didn't win the last election, because they said they were going to tackle immigration, for example, and they didn't, particularly illegal immigration. You've now seen over the summer with those riots, and I do think this is a response to the riots, because I think the whole point of uniting the kingdom, as this protest is entitled, is to send a message to the government to say, hang about, you've stood up the criminal justice system, OK, rightly, against those that committed acts of thuggery and criminal damage and all the rest of it, but you're still not addressing the fundamental problems that we feel in this country, which is that there is far too much illegal immigration that comes into this country. There's a sense of unfairness where you have one group of police officers that says to people who might appear to be white from a particular community, say, well, you can't protest here, you can't do that. But if you're from a Muslim particular community, a police officer will say, just hand your weapons in or leave them behind, but we won't do anything about it. I think that was the chief superintendent in Birmingham that confronted that group. And that is the issue. It's the hypocrisy, and that's what brings out the worst in people.
OK, thank you very much. We will be bringing you continuing a coverage of both marches, 4 actually, I think there are going on, all the protests in London, as and when anything happens. Don't worry about that. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tell us about this film, because it's obviously come from your own experiences.
We wanted to create something for the entertainment industry that wasn't just another kind of dull documentary. I mean, some of them are brilliant, they're very informative, but you kind of leave a bit bewildered and a little bit kind of flat. So we thought, I've got a passion for writing, and you've obviously got an unbounded knowledge on the subject. Why don't we create a film with a kind of satirical look on eating disorders?
So this came it's been made 20 years after your own...
It is 20 years.
20 years,
practically to the day.
So Samantha, you suffered with OCD and an eating disorder as well?
Yes.
And that's when your mum became a counsellor, is that right?
A little bit later on, I think we spent a bit of time in the system and I realised that it wasn't working for us. So I took it on myself to learn as much as I could about the subject.
I call it a tragedy, probably the wrong word, but
No, it is a tragedy because mental ill health and eating disorders destroy the lives of not only the sufferers but their families as well.
But you've turned that into something so positive and so
It's amazing, really, that 20 years ago our story was just beginning, and 20 years on, what we've done. But I have to say that very little has changed in the system.
I've heard that.
And I think that's what we're passionate about.
Yeah, so...
That was why we wanted to... I mean, I work with families every day and I see the destruction that eating disorders and other mental illnesses not just bring to the sufferer, but the whole family.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really passions me, because obviously 20 years ago we were there. And I just feel that so much more needs to be done. And I think with eating disorders, there is still a lot of misunderstanding around the subject.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Newsom. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has said that the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes following recent tensions about the potential tax rises and his definition of what a working person is. The Prime Minister also addressed the issue of reparations, stating that conversations around reparatory justice have been agreed at the summit, but that none around money. He spoke earlier. This is what he had to say.
I should be really clear here. In the 2 days we've been here, none of the discussions have been about money. Our position is very, very clear in relation to that.
Yeah, right, joining me now is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, that was Keir Starmer being very clear, or was it?
Well, he would have you believe he was being very clear. I think on the issue of financial reparations for our part in the slave trade, it is pretty clear. The government have said categorically. He said none of the discussions have been about money. They've said they're not going to be paying reparations. Of course, we heard astronomical estimates of how much that might be, up to £18 trillion, which, of course, we can't begin to afford. So that is clearly not going to happen. But there is mention in this joint communique signed by the 56 countries at this Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting of discussions around reparatory justice. Now, that is something much looser, but perhaps we will see going forward more support for some of these small island nations in particular, very much affected by climate change, more support for them with that. The government would say they're already supporting them in some ways with that, and potentially writing off some of the very long-standing debt as well. In terms of working people, I think the government have dug themselves into a massive hole about this. I feel like we spent days discussing what is or is not a working person. But what we do know is that Labour, before the election, said that they wouldn't be putting up taxes on working people. Now, when you drill down into that, what they meant by that was taxes, income tax, VAT and national insurance, the three biggest taxes paid by working people, not going up. Of course, there's many other taxes, capital gains tax, fuel duty perhaps, inheritance tax, that we hear the government are likely to be putting up come the budget on Wednesday, who also are paid by many, many working people. And also, it sounds like the income tax thresholds at which you go into higher bands of tax, which had already been frozen till 2028, it sounds like that freeze is going to go on for even longer, which will drag more people into those tax brackets. It also sounds like they're going to be putting up national insurance on employers' contributions. Now, they will say that's not a tax on working people, but people like the Shadow Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has hit back at that and said that raising employers' national insurance is a jobs tax that's paid by working people. He says not only will it harm businesses, it will mean fewer jobs and lower wages.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on what Keir Starmer didn't say and wasn't really clear about in my world, to be honest with you. Benjamin, the first rule of holes in my world is to stop digging. OK, this working people thing, it's like...
A few years too late for me, but...
yeah, actually, that's true. You're already in Australia, aren't you? But, I mean, it is like, you know, it's like just Labour should just quit this working people thing now and be honest about what they actually mean.
Well, I mean, the question comes because that's what they used in their manifesto a couple of months ago, no tax rises on working people. So they ruled out national insurance that we pay, income tax and something else, VAT. They ruled those out. Now, of course, the economy is in such a position and the tax receipts are in such a state that something has to give. And the question has been about whether it is legitimate to put them up on assets, shares, inheritance, and whether that's a working person. I actually think that what it looks like they're going to do, what Rachel Reeves is expected to do, is the right thing, because it's ridiculous that you have a situation where people make more money from living off their assets than you can do from going out and working and trying to create businesses. Things are completely the wrong way round at the moment. You have landlords making a fortune while people in their 30s, even 40s, can't get on the housing ladder. That is a mess of an economy.
The majority of landlords are people with one property, and most of them work in jobs as well. They're not fat cat landlords.
Mm-hmm. Well, many people live off them in their pensionable age, for example, and yet they still want the winter fuel allowance. I think you have a situation whereby the economy is completely disjointed because people that can live off the assets they get and inflate the prices of those. You know, rents last year went up 16% in London. That is an unbelievable rise. Meanwhile, wages and the cost of living, the wages are stagnant and the cost of living has gone up in many other areas. So you've got a situation where you have a generational divide in this country. And you saw it at the election because until recently, the best indicator of how somebody voted was class. At the last election, the clearest indication was age. Only when you get to 66 are people more likely to vote Tory. And I think that while in the short term people will go, oh, Labour's rising taxes, actually the Tories have a massive problem. Because if you're only going to support asset-rich, much older people, then you're losing the future of this country.
Charlie, with the asset-rich, much older people, there won't be many of them left because many of them would have been frozen to death in their homes because of the
come off it. Well, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, at the last election, it wasn't. I mean, most people didn't turn up to vote the last election because they couldn't endorse this Labour government's manifesto. And all the while, I mean, talking about those rents in London, rents were slashed and plummeted, obviously, during COVID, and the market would just pick up naturally. So you will see big hikes in rents. If you start taxing people and driving out the business owners or driving out landlords, that will just make even more people more homeless, which I don't think anybody wants to see. So there are things that the government can do, what it shouldn't never have done, and it's the transition from being a campaign opposition organisation into actually making the tough decisions about government. And what they've said is that they won't tax, they won't increase national insurance, VAT or income tax. But now they're trying to fiddle the books by saying, we meant national insurance contributions
there was
on...
a small print that
they didn't small mention. Print, apparently. And now this idea of working people, they lulled us into this false sense of security that we were all working people. The majority of people are hard-working people, but only actually a certain number of you, if you've got a little bit of savings, will come after you. If you're a poor pensioner, actually terribly sorry, tough decisions have got to be made. We'll take your winter fuel allowance away. But we've protected the strikes, in the NHS, and thank God they had, because as you say, they'll end up treating a lot more pensioners in this winter because of the decisions, the horrible decisions, the callous decisions that they're making. And I think the country is soon starting to see what a Labour government is obviously doing and how unfit it is for office. And people, I think, will be very, very prepared at the next election to come out. Whether they vote Conservative again is another matter, depending on the leadership, but they'll certainly be coming out in their drones to vote out this Labour government.
Well, let's be clear. The reason that the economy or the public finances more specifically are not in a good space...
They've got a good inheritance.
Because, well, you might believe this, but you're insulting the viewers thinking anyone else will believe that codswallop. And frankly, as someone who was in government as a special advisor for 5 years, I think you should carry some of the blame. You ought to show a bit more humility.
£40 billion the Labour government.
You ought to show a bit more humility for the mess you left this country in, Charlie. But look, the fact is that
unemployment up, wages up, growth getting back into... That's the inheritance they've got after a very, very difficult time. After winning, by the way,
nothing shows Tory arrogance like the fact that you can look at the mess this country's in, with all the boats and the lack of money and the highest taxes in 70 years that Tories introduced. The audacity that you can sit there and tell people to be grateful for what you left.
You want to talk about
Charlie?
The deterrent on the small boats, the only deterrent we had, the Labour Party came in on day one and were proud about it, singing from the rooftops that they were getting rid of the Rwanda.
You managed to get 200 million quid on that and still didn't deport a single migrant, so that didn't work. But let me answer the question you put. When the choice is between making life not so easy for someone that's living off assets, that's not contributing anything directly to the economy, that's not inventing anything, so that you can pay a 25-year-old who's just done exceptionally well to train as a doctor, who's had a more than 30% pay cut in the last decade. I actually think that is exactly what the country should look like.
There are many people...
I tell you what, it's the politics of having boomers control this country.
Attacking the pensioners again. Here we go.
I will attack the millionaires, because the fact is that when you've got 30-year-olds...
That's the thing. They're not millionaires.
When you've got 30-year-olds who've qualified as a doctor and can't even rent a flat in central London, the economy has a problem.
There are people who are asset-rich in this country. They might own a property, they might have... But they are cash poor. They don't have the savings. They don't necessarily have that income. And it's the Labour government that is going after those people.
So how do you think everybody else does it?
Unfortunately, we're going to leave that one hanging there because we have to take a quick break. I'm Jordan Leeson, this is GBNews, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, it is time for the news headlines with Sophia Wenzel.
It's 2:32. These are your headlines from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has warned Iran not to respond after Israel conducted precise strikes on military targets in Iran overnight. Downing Street says escalation is in no one's interest and the UK is monitoring the live situation. The retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime come after Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago. Terror group Hamas has condemned Israel's attack on Iran as an escalation, calling it a violation of Iran's sovereignty and a threat to regional security. But the IDF says they'll do whatever necessary to defend the state. Now, it's understood Commonwealth leaders have agreed the time has come for a conversation about reparations for the slave trade. That's despite the UK's desire to keep the subject off the agenda at a 2-day summit in Samoa. It's being reported that a document signed by 56 heads of government, including the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, acknowledges calls for discussions on reparatory justice for the abhorrent transatlantic slave trade. The Prime Minister addressed the issue in a press conference, insisting that there had been no discussions about money at the major summit. Back in the UK, political activist Tommy Robinson is missing from his own planned protest in central London today after he was remanded into custody by police overnight. Kent Police confirmed the 41-year-old's arrest as he faces potential jail time for alleged contempt of court. Thousands of Tommy Robinson supporters are marching towards Parliament Square in central London for the rally. Some demonstrators are wearing I Am Peter Lynch badges. It's in reference to a 61-year-old man who died in prison after being jailed for screaming abuse at riot police outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. Meanwhile, hundreds of people have also gathered for a march in central London to protest over deaths in custody alongside the Justice for Chris Cabba campaign. Activists are lining the corner of Trafalgar Square and have begun the planned United Families and Friends campaign march to Downing Street. The campaign group supports the families of loved ones who've lost at the hands of police custody. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophia. Now, there's plenty more coming up on today's show, but before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana Queer has joined me in the studio, and her show starts at 3 o'clock. Nana, I'm sure it's going to be a cracker. What have you got lined up?
Well, of course, we're going to carry on with this excruciatingly painful situation where Keir Starmer is unable to clearly define what a working person is because, obviously, they said they wouldn't tax working people, and unfortunately, more and more people seem to be falling into the barrier of that definition, which is most entertaining in a way, but not so much if you happen to not be a working person in his definition. So my niggle will be looking into that, and I'll find out how many politicians have managed to struggle with that definition. Also, I've got a question for you. Which politician had their credit card suspended because they'd racked up a £4,000 bill? That's a question. Who do you think? Yeah, I'll reveal that during the show. Plus, we will continue to go live to the Tommy Robinson protest. And my difficult conversation is with Chris Rose and hopefully Ken Hines, if we can get him in. We will be talking about the whole Chris Cabba situation and why actually it seems that the justice seems slightly different when it's somebody who's black to somebody who's white. That's what I'm thinking. But what are you? That's coming up at 3 o'clock.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nana. Always a cracker. You don't want to miss it. That's at 3 o'clock. Now there's loads more coming up on the show today, so don't go anywhere. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We have a three-way split in the weather today. Sunny for some, grey in the southeast, with rain in the northwest. Having a look at the bigger picture then, we've got frontal systems towards the southeast, bringing cloudier skies here, and then we have this cold front bringing increasing amounts of cloud towards the north and west. So a damp afternoon for some of us, especially towards the southeast, patchy outbreaks of rain, cloudier skies here, and towards the northwest, this band of more persistent and heavy rain moving southeastwards. But in between, across much of northern England, Wales and the southwest of England, plenty of sunshine on offer, and we could see highs reaching up to 15 or 16 degrees. So as we go through Saturday afternoon, we have bands of heavy rain pushing its way southeastwards across much of Scotland. Behind that, blustery showers coming through and also turning much chillier. Across Northern Ireland, some early evening sunshine across the far west, but outbreaks of rain still continuing to push their way south and eastwards. Some early evening sunshine across parts of Wales and the southwest of England, but across parts of the southeast staying cloudy here, but the cloud will gradually ease. We may see some mist and fog developing, and then this band of cloud and rain will sink its way southwards into parts of Wales, into the Midlands, but generally starts fizzling out as it does so to bring many places a dry and clear night, but it will be feeling colder out there. So as we start Sunday morning, it will be a bright but chilly start to the day. Any mist and fog patches are soon lifting. So that leaves plenty of autumnal sunshine out there across much of England and Wales, but another system moving through, so bringing cloud and outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland to end Sunday, feeling chillier for all of us, highs of 14 degrees. Bye-bye.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Dear Lordy, Lordy. Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Needham. I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon out there. Now, we have a brand new section for you, all shiny and new. It's where we look at some of the other stories making the newspapers for you. And today, we are going to kick off with Veterans Bash Gay Poppy Badge. Gentlemen, I have Benjamin and Charlie with me. So what on earth is this story about? How can the poppy be inflammatory? Benjamin, let's come to you first on this one.
Well, it's not inflammatory to start, but the story is that one of the versions of the poppy that you can buy this year, and there are a great many different versions, whether it's the paper one that Charlie and I have or the posh one that you have.
It's a Dame Vera Lynn one.
It's very
and
nice.
it was given to me, actually, by Dame Vera Lynn just before she died.
You didn't pay for it?
I donate generously every year, but I was interviewing her and her daughter.
Don't backtrack now. And there are also ones, for example, there's a football version of the poppy, and this year there is a red poppy which has the Pride LGBT flag attached to it. And this has caused...
You can see it on screen there.
Yeah, this
colourful.
has caused some outrage from a handful of people that spoke to the Sun newspaper today who think that it's an insult.
How do you know it's a handful of people, Benjamin?
Well, there's one person quoted who seems to be annoyed by it, who was a senior in the army at one point. But look, I really think that the outrage at this, if there is any, is completely wrong, because given that there is a poppy to celebrate football, I really think the idea that there's a poppy to celebrate gay veterans, of which there are now many, is a good thing. Unless we forget that the Second World War might not have been won by us if it weren't for a gay man. It was Alan Turing who cracked the Enigma code that probably was the single most significant shift that we had to win the war at the end. And what did the British state do to that genius? Well, they chemically castrated him and he took his own life a few years later. Such was the depth of the depression that this country put him in. Now, that is a point of such deep shame. And it was only 20-odd years ago that we stopped banning people stopped it being a criminal offence to be openly gay in the armed forces. And I think putting right those and having a way to fundraise for veterans today from this badge, which is £8, so, you know, you have to be a rich gay to afford it, I think that's a good thing.
Charlie, I think, I mean, obviously, very, very relevant points Benjamin made there about homosexuality being illegal back in the day. But this, I think the main issue with this is the trans area and the fact that some of the profits from this badge, which, as Benjamin should point out, costs £8, is going to Stonewall, which is a very controversial organisation.
I think the whole thing is ridiculous. And I think most people would be sitting at their homes looking at their television thinking exactly the same. If there is one thing that is above politics and above any kind of division or any kind of group or section of society, whether it's religion, whether it's race, whether it's sexuality, whether it's gender, it is about the people that put on that uniform and train to defend this country and many, many people across the world where they're on international missions. The one thing that can bring this country together, and everybody the whole country will celebrate whoever puts on that uniform, whether you are black or white or gay or straight or trans or from the north or from the south, or if you're younger or if you're a bit older, or whatever you are, whatever your race, religion, colour, creed, whatever it is, putting on that uniform of the armed forces is what gets you that respect. That's what unites this country. And wearing one single poppy for a day, even if it's just on Remembrance Day, to put aside all of that division and celebrate the success of this country, remember those that lost their lives, regardless of who they were, because of the respect and pride that we have in all of those people, I think should be something we should be focusing on, not
but that's long not
creating
been
all
the
of
case,
these.
because there are lots of different types of poppies. There's a poppy that is designed with football for football supporters, and weirdly there was no outrage about that. But by your logic,
and that shouldn't happen
you'll know
either.
that right by Downing Street there is a statue in tribute to the women who were a part of the war effort. By your logic, that shouldn't exist because it's singling them out.
Well, lots of people who've made significant contributions. The women, actually, I think, were underreported during some of the war, which is why I think it's right to reban rebalance that, as it is.
So why is it not
right
right to recognise the fact that, I mean, the war was arguably won by a gay man?
Because, and I absolutely agree that where you have those injustices, then actually you do the right thing and repair that in the past. So obviously decriminalising homosexuality obviously is the right step forward. But that's what should happen to right those wrongs. What you don't need, I just think on one day of Remembrance Sunday that we have every year, it is one symbol, one poppy that unites all of us without, again, getting into these conversations. Why does somebody need to be wearing a different poppy to somebody else? But we're all taking pride. It's not about me, by the way, and it's not about someone that might be gay or trans, because they want to remember that particular group of people who fought in the war more than anyone else. You stand shoulder to shoulder with whoever they are to support our armed forces. And that is what brings us together. We don't need to politicise it. We don't need a cast of thousands or poppies of thousands.
One of the reasons...
Nobody goes into war thinking, have I got my helmet, have I got my bayonet and my pride flag in my back? Nobody thinks like that.
That's actually offensive nonsense because, take Dame Kelly Holmes, for example, a woman who said just 2 years ago when she came out as being a lesbian that until 2 years ago she was suicidal because of how scared she was 20 years after leaving the armed forces that people would find out that she was a gay woman. That is the kind of thing that people were persecuted for. We know there are cases where people were forcefully outed in the armed forces even after the law was changed, and they lost their life, they lost their reputation, and many of them are still trying to get money back for the punishment that was wrongfully done to them, as we now recognise. So people thinking about their sexuality was a massive thing when they were punished by law for it.
And that's
in our lifetime.
And that's why you changed the law, and that's why obviously the institutions of the armed forces and the military sort of changed to make sure that they can recruit, and they would be willing now. I think when you talk to senior military commanders now, obviously open and willing to recruit the brightest and the best, regardless of sexuality. But I just think as a nation, can we not have one day where we are celebrating the history and pride of this country? And there is no greater pride than, I think, than signing up to put your life on the line to defend our country, to defend our rights if we were invaded again, God forbid, by any other country since the war, and relieving that injustice for millions of people across the world. The international missions that our UK armed forces go on is something that is often underreported. It is one day where we can put aside all of these differences and stop talking about, well, this one group might be more underrepresented than another. We all take pride in our armed forces, and it should be one poppy, and that's that.
People should be allowed to show patriotism however they want, and determination. And I think we should be grateful. You get so many people saying, oh, why don't young people show their love for the country or the respect for the wars that were fought? Here is a way in which many young people
wear the
will
pride badge.
To it.
Wear the pride badge,
well,
but it doesn't have to be associated with the poppy. The poppy on its own is enough. Everybody should be proud of the poppy, regardless.
Has the regular poppy and the badge next to it, so it's not as though the poppy itself is changed into the rainbow flag. I think this is a good thing, and ultimately £8 going towards the Royal British Legion is raising money for veterans that are around now.
I'd rather buy a veteran a pint with that £8 than I would on that badge. And I think most people would agree.
Strong words. Well, do you agree? Do you agree indeed? gbnews.com/your say. Now, a huge thank you to my panel, journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley. Thank you very much for joining me. A very, very feisty debate there. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. We'll see you very soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Italian wine in Britain is worth a whopping £891 million and can be described as a Prosecco phenomenon, apparently. So joining us now to tell us more about why these Italian bubbles are so popular is Ed Smith, the founder of The Emissary, a British-based Prosecco brand. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, guys.
Thank you for coming in, and you've done just as we asked. You've come laden with booze and bottles and glasses.
Exactly.
So the definition of Prosecco, Tatiana, you were saying earlier, is sparkling wine that's been made in certain areas of Italy. Which areas?
Exactly. So the Prosecco region is northeast Italy. It's about sort of an hour north of Venice, foothills of Dolomite Mountains. Very, very beautiful part of Italy. Veneto, exactly. Well done.
Show off.
I'm half Italian, so...
well, there we go. OK, you should be teaching me.
No, that's it.
So like Champagne, that has to come from the Champagne region in France. Prosecco has to come from the Prosecco region in Italy. And it's different to Champagne and other sparkling wines, like English sparkling wine, in that geography, like we just mentioned, has to come from that region in Italy. The grapes that are used are different. So Prosecco has to be at least 85% Glera, which is the native grapes of the region. And it's most importantly the method. So champagne and English sparkling wines use the traditional method, where second fermentation, which produces the bubbles, happens in the bottle, whereas Prosecco uses what's called the Charmat method. So the second fermentation happens in steel vats. It's a much quicker process, and that's why Prosecco is a bit more affordable.
So the Emissary is a British-based Prosecco brand.
Yeah.
So is it made in the UK?
No, made in Italy.
Yeah, that's why you can call it Prosecco.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can't call it Prosecco unless it's made in those two regions.
Great. So can we get stuck into some of these? That's the most important thing of this morning.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now it's time to talk all things showbiz, and it being the weekend and it being the weekend before Halloween, it can only mean one thing and one thing only, and that's Strictly Come Dancing. Now, hello and welcome to the lovely showbiz journalist Danielle Mason, who has joined me in the studio. Danielle, Strictly Come Dancing. I mean, it's the gift that carries on giving as well as scandal is concerned at the moment. Now, Wyn Evans, who we had the story earlier on with the wandering hand around the tummy.
With Katia.
With Katia.
Apparently, Katia has a lot of dramas on the show. Apparently, she had a drama last year as well, but I can't remember what that was.
Right.
But I did see that he's been under fire again this week. Because in his makeup room he made a joke, a sexual innuendo joke.
Yes.
And somebody's obviously sold him out on that from the makeup room. So it's quite bad, really, from the team of Strictly to be selling out stories like that. It's going to put him... He's not going to want to be able to relax. And you can see him when he's on the TV, like, he doesn't know where to put his hands now. He feels like he's really under fire. But then also, I've also read a story about Fern Britton this week. She's released a book and she hasn't been very
she said she was
supportive
quite upset. She was in tears often before going to rehearsals.
Yes, she said she got very stressed out with rehearsals and more or less didn't want to go a lot because she would be in tears before rehearsals where the dancer would say to her, you know, you can't dance, you can't do this. So it had a bit of an impact, I think, on her with her mental health as well. And she reports that in her book. Also, Pete Wicks we've had is...
Oh, there's a love triangle. It wouldn't be Strictly without a love triangle. Pete Wicks is the tattooed guy, isn't he? From whatever reality show it is.
Yes, there's been a lot of stories out about Pete Wicks. He seems to be like the love legend at the moment. You know, he's been seen pulling Moira Higgins from Love Island this week at... an event. Pride of Britain it was we had this week. So he's been seen pulling her, but then he's also been caught up, seen, you know, with his dancing partner as well. But he's doing really well on the show, really well on the show at the moment. So I look forward to watching that tonight.
Yeah. Is it the Halloween one this week? I think it is.
It is the Halloween one, yeah. So I'm not sure what Pete's doing, but I did like him when he was in his leopard print outfit and he had... he had no shoes on.
Yeah, he was very, like, caveman, wasn't
he? And he was really giving his hips a good wiggle.
Yeah.
Which I think is what's turning all the women on at the moment.
Figure of eight, evidently, is that if she says doing it, I can't dance for toffee, so don't even look at me bothering. And just quickly, the other big reality TV show that starts in November is I'm a Celebrity.
Yes.
In the Jungle. Now, the rumour is that Colleen Rooney is going in there.
Yes, so she's going to be spilling the beans, I think, on all the football things going on. We had Wagatha Christie back last year. year. So I think that's what the producers are getting involved with there. But I've also heard Tommy Fury, Molly May's ex, was signed up for the show, but apparently he's now pulled out because he's had better offers on the table from ITV. So that's what I've heard on that.
Brilliant. That's all to watch. Thank you very much,
Yes,
Daniel
thank
Mason,
you.
for Planet Showbiz there. Now, loads more coming up on GB News the rest of the day. And Nana is here at 3 o'clock with a very, very feisty show indeed. But before we go to Nana, I'll see you tomorrow, by the way, tomorrow lunchtime. Don't go anywhere. Nana is next, but first let's get the weather with Catherine for you.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We've got a three-way split in the weather today. Rain in the northwest, sunnier for most towards the south, but it will be turning chillier for all of us on Sunday. Having a look at the bigger picture, we've got frontal systems out towards the south and east, but a cold front towards the northwest. And here we have heavy spells of rain sinking their way south and eastwards across Scotland, but later into northwest England, into Wales, but it will gradually sink its way southwards and start fizzling out. We may see some mist and fog patches across the southeast early through this evening, but those should clear. And in many places tonight, seeing a clear night, but temperatures will drop. We may see some mist and fog, but also some pockets of frost. So a colder but brighter start out there through Sunday for many of us. There will be some showers, especially across northern parts of Scotland, quite blustery as they move through. But across many places, still seeing some sunshine, but feeling colder out there to start Sunday morning. And then we have cloud and rain coming through across western parts later into Northern Ireland. Elsewhere though, across much of England and Wales, plenty of sunshine to start the day. And we hold on to that sunshine across much of England and Wales through Sunday, so plenty of autumnal sunshine out there. But further towards the west, especially across Northern Ireland and Scotland, it'll be turning increasingly cloudy and damp with outbreaks of rain moving through, persistent but also quite heavy over the hills. For all of us though, it is going to be feeling quite chilly out there. We'll see highs of 13 or 14 degrees in the south. As we go through Sunday evening, that cloud and rain across Scotland and Northern Ireland will continue to push in, affecting northwestern parts of England and into Wales later. But as we go into the week, higher pressure does start to dominate, but it'll be quite cloudy still, with temperatures close to average. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you £5,000 to spend on all of your Christmas presents, with a further £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. You'll get it all in time for the big day. For your chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your net